Good evening, everyone, and thank you for attending and viewing the June 7th meeting of the Arcata City Council. The City Council meeting is being held as a hybrid meeting with both in-person attendance and teleconference access via Zoom. The first item on our agenda this evening is a land acknowledgement, and tonight's land acknowledgement will be read in English and in Spanish by Kate B. and Brenda Perez, representing Centro del Pueblo.
Good evening. The City of Arcata acknowledges that the lands we are located on are the unceded ancestral lands of the Wiyot tribe. The land that Arcata rests on is known in the Wiyot language as Gudini, meaning over the woods or among the redwoods. Past actions by local, state, and federal governments removed the Wiyot and other indigenous peoples from the land and threatened to destroy their cultural practices. The City of Arcata acknowledges the Wiyot community, their elders both past and present, as well as future generations. This acknowledgement seeks to aid in dismantling the legacy narratives of settler colonialism.
Buenas tardes. La ciudad de Arcata reconoce que las tierras en que estamos ubicados son las tierras ancestrales no cedidas de la tribu Wiyot. La tierra donde se encuentra Arcata se conoce en el idioma Wiyot como Gudini, que significa en el bosque o entre las secuoyas. Las acciones pasadas de los gobiernos locales, estatales y federales sacaron a los Wiyot y a otros pueblos indígenas de la tierra y amenazaron con destruir sus prácticas culturales. La ciudad de Arcata reconoce a la comunidad Wiyot, a sus mayores, tanto del pasado como del presente, así como a las generaciones futuras. Este reconocimiento intenta ayudar a desmantelar las narrativas heredadas del colonialismo.
Thank you. All right, our next item, if you would like to join us for the flag salute. Will the city clerk please call the roll?
Mayor Schaefer,
Here.
Vice Mayor Matthews,
Here.
Councilmember Atkins Salazar,
Here.
Councilmember White,
Here.
Councilmember Stillman. Present. All present.
If you wish to make a comment during tonight's meeting, either during at the two open public comment periods or for an individual agenda item, there are 3 ways to do so. If you are here in person, please line up behind the podium when the item you would like to speak on is accepting comment. If you're logged into Zoom, you can click raise your hand when it's time for public comment on the item you wish to speak on, or if you are on the phone, please press *9 to raise your hand, and when it's your turn, you will be prompted to dial *6 to unmute your phone. For each item, we will be taking in-person public comment first and then move to online comments. We will not be going back and forth, so if you're wanting to comment, please line up at the podium or raise your electronic hand as soon as public comment is requested for that item. All right, so we will now begin with our ceremonial matters. So item A under ceremonial matters is a proclamation in recognition of World Oceans Day, June 8th, 2023, and this proclamation will be read by Vice Mayor Matthews.
The City of Arcata proclamation in recognition of World Oceans Day, June 8th, 2023. Whereas the ocean provides 1/2 of the oxygen we breathe, regulates our climate, and provides us with food, water, and economic support, World Oceans Day is an annual opportunity to honor the world's oceans by building awareness of the crucial role the ocean plays in our lives. And whereas the people of Humboldt County can help protect our ocean's future by partnering and volunteering with local schools and organizations such as Humboldt Baykeeper, Surfrider Humboldt, the North Coast Environmental Center, and Friends of the Arcata Marsh. And whereas the City of Arcata's Environmental Services Department also organizes opportunities year-round to help clean our creeks, improve watershed health by keeping trash from entering Humboldt Bay, thus reducing the impact of marine debris into ocean ecosystems. Now therefore be it proclaimed that the City Council of the City of Arcata hereby recognizes Thursday, June 8th, 2023 to be World Oceans Day in Arcata and encourages the community to participate in coastal and watershed cleanup days throughout the year. Dated June 7th, 2023, signed Sarah Schaefer, Mayor.
Thank you, and I don't believe we have anybody currently here to accept that, but we will get that to the right people. Our next proclamation, which also, unfortunately, we don't have anybody from Arcata High this evening because they're having their senior awards assembly, but is a proclamation recognition of Arcata, Six Rivers Charter, and Pacific Coast High School Safe and Sober Graduation Day, Thursday, June 15th, 2023. Read by myself, Arcata High, class of 2010. So a proclamation in recognition of Arcata, Six Rivers Charter, and Pacific Coast High School's Safe and Sober Graduation Day. Whereas safe graduation parties are a nationwide project sponsored by health organizations, businesses, law enforcement agencies, and many other groups. And whereas this year's Arcata High School, Six Rivers Charter High School, and Pacific Coast High School senior classes, their parents, and community are overwhelmingly in support of attending and providing a safe graduation party. And whereas 5,000 teenagers die and 400,000 are seriously injured in auto accidents each year. Of the 15 to 20-year-old drivers who die in car crashes, 23% have a blood alcohol level of 0.08 or higher, enough to be charged with driving under the influence if they were adults. And whereas residents throughout the county have agreed to drive with their lights on during graduation week, and the Arcata community has volunteered to keep porch lights on throughout graduation night on Thursday, June 15th, 2023. Now, therefore, be it proclaimed that the City Council of the City of Arcata hereby designates Thursday, June 15th, 2023 as Arcata High School, Six Rivers Charter, and Pacific Coast High Safe and Sober Graduation Day. And the City of Arcata congratulates the graduating class of 2023. Dated today and signed by myself. So we'll get that to our folks at Arcata High, and congratulations to all the graduates. Our next proclamation, which we do have a large group here to accept that, is proclamation designated June 4th through 10th, 2023 as the Week of the Oyster. And this will be read by council member and our liaison to Arcata Main Street, Stacey Atkins-Salazar.
Thank you. The Week of the Oyster. Whereas the Arcata downtown business community, in order to showcase Arcata's relationship to high-quality water resources and Arcata and Humboldt Bays, is producing Arcata Main Street's 33rd annual Arcata Bay Oyster Festival on Saturday, June 10th, 2023, to be held on the downtown plaza. Arcata Main Street founded the Plaza Watershed Program and recognizes the City of Arcata and the City of Eureka's significant efforts to improve and maintain water quality in Humboldt Bay, which supports aquaculture, plant and fish populations, and many recreational activities. And whereas our local aquaculture industry farms over 450 acres of Arcata Bay to produce the highest quality and the largest quantity of oysters in the state of California. And whereas Arcata Main Street's Arcata Bay Oyster Festival typically attracts visitors from all over the nation and the state of California to enjoy our natural bounty, culinary talent, entertainers, and downtown ambience. This event is an important showcase for the community and contributes significantly to the local economy through tourism, while increasing awareness of local resource conservation and our city's unique identity and varied hospitality services. And whereas this year, the entire community, young and old, families and singles, are invited to attend this event on the plaza, featuring live music from 10 a.m. to 5 p.m. on Saturday, June 10th. Participants are encouraged to dance the day away, taste the unique culinary creations, join the oyster calling and shuck and swallow contests, try the children's activities, and more. There will also be a map showcasing where to find your favorite oysters and artisans. An Oyster Festival exclusive beer from Mad River Brewery, local wines and spirits, and thousands of fellow revelers celebrating our wonderful town. Now, therefore, be it proclaimed that the City Council of the City of Arcata hereby designates June 4th through 10th, 2022 as the Week of the Oyster, and encourages all community members to enjoy the food, fun, music, and frolic at Arcata Main Street's 33rd Annual Oyster Festival on the Arcata Plaza on Saturday, June 10th. Dated June 10th, 2023, and signed by our Mayor, Sarah Schaefer. And we have, we've got Gil Miracle and a whole cast of characters from Arcata Main Street to accept this, so I will present to Gil and let you take over from there.
Good evening, everybody, and welcome. Thank you for this offer or this honor. And we're really excited about the event this weekend. And as as Stacy said, it runs from 10 to 5, and we really hope everyone can come out and make it. From the kids zone to drinking age people, there's something for everybody of all ages. And we have entertainment and all kinds of fun and frolic for everybody.
All right. Thank you, Gil, and thank you, Arcata Main Street. I know we are all looking forward to it. All right, our final proclamation this evening is a proclamation recognizing June 2023 as National Alzheimer and Brain Awareness Month, and this will be read by Councilmember Stillman.
Okay. The National Alzheimer's and Brain Awareness Month. Whereas there are more than 6 million Americans living with Alzheimer's dementia today, a figure that is expected to grow to as many as 13 million by 2050 if scientists do not develop a cure or effective treatment. And whereas 1 in 3 seniors die with Alzheimer's or another dementia, it kills more than breast cancer and prostate cancer combined. Between 2002 and 2019, death from heart disease has decreased by 7.3%, while deaths from Alzheimer's disease have increased by 145%. And whereas in 2020, COVID-19 contributed to a 17% increase in Alzheimer's and dementia deaths, and whereas more than 11 million Americans provide unpaid care for people with Alzheimer's and other dementia. In 2021, these caregivers provided more than 18 billion hours of care, valued at nearly $340 billion. And whereas Alzheimer's disease is a local issue, our friends and neighbors need to access to support services and resources to lessen the disease's impacts. In Humboldt County, it's estimated that about 3,384 people currently live with Alzheimer's or related dementias. There are another 7,600 caregivers who are caring for one of their loved ones with Alzheimer's. And whereas fewer than 1 in 5 Americans are familiar with mild cognitive impairment, which can be an early stage of Alzheimer's, and 90% of physicians say it's important to diagnose MCI due to Alzheimer's, but over half say they are not fully comfortable making that diagnosis. And whereas during June, the Alzheimer's Association invites Humboldt County residents to participate in the longest day on June 21st, held I really have to take a sip of, oh my goodness, water. I just looked up, ooh. Held on the summer solstice. The longest day invites participants to fight the darkness of Alzheimer's through a fundraising activity of their choice or by wearing purple. Now therefore be proclaimed by the City Council of the City of Arcata recognizes June 2023 as Alzheimer's and Brain Awareness Month. The Council thanks the Alzheimer's Association providing services to people and families coping with dementia. It's signed by Mayor Schaefer, and it's being accepted on Zoom by Kim Kaleo.
Kim, if you are on Zoom as call-in user, could you raise your hand? All right, I don't think Kim is online.
Well, we'll be able to give it to her at another time. So thank you.
All right, thank you. So our next item is early oral communications. I did just see a lot of folks enter, and so if we are planning on making comment during this time, we are operating with a card system. So the first 4, the cards are up here on the table by the police chief there. So if you're planning on making comment, please grab one of those cards. We'll take the first 4 in person, then we'll go online, but if we have more time in this 15-minute time period, we'll come back to folks that are here in the room. So again, this 15-minute time period allows people to address the council on matters that are not on the agenda. Please know that pursuant to the Brown Act, the council cannot discuss or take action on items that are not listed on the posted agenda. And at the end of oral communications, the council may respond to statements, and supported requests that require action will be set for a future agenda. There will also be time for the public to comment specifically on each agenda item, and again at the end of the meeting under item number 12. So if you are here in person and you do have one of those numbered cards, numbered 1 through 4, please make your way to the podium and line up. If you have the card, please make your way to the podium and line up. Beautiful. All right, and so you'll have 2 minutes, and then we'll check in with folks on Zoom and come back if we still have time in this 15 minutes.
You want to see it?
And you can just set the card, either leave it there on the podium or set it up on the table here. Yeah.
Okay, good afternoon, everybody. One thing I want to ask all the members of the City Council to personally thank the crew that actually paved the street where I live. It was a mess. It would wake me up at 2, 3 o'clock in the morning of all the potholes. And this crew came in, and in less than a week, they cleaned up that year-old mess on D Street, D as in David, between 10th and 12th. So that's one thing I ask you to do, to please thank them, the crew that actually did it. And also, I ask, as a person that's worked over 22 years in accounting and economics, we need to double the budget for our police department. It's not, I don't doubt their quality, but I am afraid of their quantity. So that's going to be your budget, what's coming up. Another thing that I have been requested by neighbors that for different reasons could not come to this meeting, please, please do not use L Street for trucks. Please don't do that. And the other thing, which I feel very important, I thank the people that are purchasing the old motels, but we need to contact the College of the Redwoods and Cal Poly and organize the homeless to work it out, to work, actually do the work. There are people who know how to do that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mi nombre es Brenda Pérez y él es Adán Cervantes. Somos familia del Jardín Santuario. We are families here gathered for the Sanctuary Garden. We are here to demand a stop to hate crimes. It's been more than 12, and this is unsustainable, unbearable. And it's really, it's a situation that needs to stop now. It's going to be almost 1 year after the first attack. So the first thing I need you to take in your agenda is the invitation of Centro del Pueblo to come and clean with us that sign. Because that sign, it's saying something that is a suffering for the entire city, a suffering for the entire Humboldt County. This cannot be called a sanctuary city with those hate crimes. And it's a shame on this government. And it's a shame. I cannot listen more sorries from you or from the police department. I need actions. And I made a call of action for all the neighbors that are here. And I'm making the same call of actions for you. So I'm waiting for you next week to come and clean with us that sign on volunteer hours, as a group, as our representatives, representing every race and every person here migrating to Arcata. Shame on everyone on you. This is what I want to say. We cannot live more as neighbors with more than 12 hate crimes. We cannot live, we cannot bear that. This is a community garden, and there is no more public statements that could cover those hate crimes. We live under fear, and we live harassed. So there is no sanctuary city unless you made something. This is a call to action. This is the first time I come with these neighbors, these relatives, for make a network for safetyness. This is for me, my daughter, and all my ancestors. And I won't rest until you make something.
Hola, buenas tardes. Mi nombre es Adán Cervantes. Quiero darles gracias por el espacio que nos dan el día de ahora. Sabemos que están en su reunión. Nosotros venimos solamente a poner nuestro punto de vista, ¿verdad? Que les pedimos un apoyo para el Jardín Santuario. Solamente nosotros estamos haciendo, pues, un trabajo para todo el pueblo, ¿verdad? Estamos trabajando para sembrar verduras, compartir con los compañeros para todo el condado de acá de Arcata, Jambo. Y les pedimos el apoyo. Les pedimos el apoyo porque la verdad creo que nosotros no hacemos más que ayudarnos a nosotros mismos, a enseñar a los niños cómo se cultiva la verdura, la fruta. Y la verdad que es una tristeza ver que a otro día todo lo que sembramos lo están quebrando. Gracias y les pido de favor que les pedimos su apoyo. Gracias.
That was an important topic to follow. Gosh. 2 minutes. So first I'll introduce myself. I'm Jeanette Todd. I am the rarely seen in the public eye or come up for air co-founder of the Fairy Festival with Shoshana. Second, I want to take a moment to celebrate the huge success of the Fairy Festival last weekend, where we saw 6,500 attendees, and for the first time in Arcata's history that I know of, and I've been around a while, we did not use one single disposable cup, and I think that that's a huge success for Arcata. It's a huge success for zero waste, etc. It could be a headline. Third, I specifically came here tonight to talk to the council about the budget and the flexibility of it. In years past, we have been able to work with the city in a way that would help us reduce or donate permit fees for these types of events. Family-friendly community events that are diverse and welcome to all people are difficult to produce with really unsavory costs. What happens are those costs that people don't often want to talk about, which are things like $1,300 for portable toilets and $2,500 in staging and lights and $1,900 for the city of Arcata. Make it to where little guys like us who want to invite everybody in and have a magical time just can't make it happen anymore. So I implore the city council to consider in their budget some flexibility to partner with groups like ours, small nonprofits who, if we did make money, we would provide things like scholarships and free camps for kids through our nonprofit Redwood Rex. But those fees just crush us. They wipe us out. They make it to where we are not really able to sustain events in Arcata. And I know that councils past have looked really hard at these fine details and worked out ways to partner with groups like ours and found criteria that worked and reasons why they could donate that support. Thank you.
Thanks. And just a reminder, this time is for items not on the agenda. So if you have things about budget, hold them until we're doing our budget here. So also quick question. So how are there so many cards? Just
What we have is the 4 green ones are the first 4, and then we
Okay.
do have 4 yellow, which are if we don't have any online. Right
Great.
now, I have nobody with a hand raised online.
Okay.
So I think you could just keep
Beautiful.
going
Then we'll
through.
just keep going right through
I do
here in
have
person if
one
there's nobody
hand
online.
raised online, but we'll call it
Okay.
at that.
We'll come to that one. We'll take the next 3 speakers here and then go to the one online.
Hi, my name's Kate B. I'm on the board for the Chamber of Commerce, but I'm also an active member for the Sanctuary Garden. What brought me there was the first attack. It's about 2 blocks from where I live, and so I thought if I bring more of a presence, maybe it would cease. But like Brenda brought up, within the past year, I mean, I have a little sign, it's almost every other month, but the last 3 attacks were in the last 30 days. So it's as if the increase of people and activity, and even the residents of Brenda and her husband, her child, who we thought would bring more, it's not really deterring these attacks. We have invested in a surveillance system, but those cameras have been taken out one by one or in a group over time. We've been locked out of our own garden because they bring their own chains. They've macheted growth that we have had within the garden. So it's just really upsetting that the idea of brown bodies gathering together to foster a strong community threatens a certain type of community within our community. So I would like to suggest, because the presence of police brings fear, perhaps we could invest more in the community ambassadors, because I know that they overhead graffiti abatement, and a lot of the things that have happened have had to do with graffiti. But these attacks also are in the evening, so I'm not sure if we can propose another job that is in the evening that could cover something like that. So it's still community-based. Maybe it won't bring as much fear, but still more eyes. And yeah, 12 attacks since July 21st. Thank you.
Thank you, Kate.
Hi, my name's Joanne McGarry, and I so appreciate people speaking out on these very, very important social justice issues. And I hope we all can come together and talk to each other and our neighbors and find out why this is happening and stop it. So that's wonderful. I come here tonight as I speak, and I'm carrying the Our Town thing to remind us that everybody in this room, we all are part of our town, and we all need to stand in a circle of compassion for one another, and bring people in from the margins and recognize that we all belong to each other. We all belong to each other. But in addition to the humans in our town, what I also want to talk about is the circumstances of what climate change is doing to our community, to the region, to the state, to the world, to our world's oceans. And if you hadn't seen it already, New York City is under smoke, like we were a few summers ago with the fires. And it's all because of climate change. And so I really do believe that here in Arcata and in Humboldt County, we can lead the way from the redwood forests to everywhere else in the world, modeling how we can live together in justice and peace, but also for the planet. I carried my food waste here. I've done this before, but we need to keep our food waste in Humboldt. This proposal to ship it out needs to not happen. We need to be creative and do something to compost in our own community, whatever it's going to take. And then we also need to reuse our cups for all events. So thank you.
All right, thank you. Okay, so for our 15 minutes here, we are going to be able to take one more in person, and then we're going to do our one comment on Zoom. So you guys can fight over who gets to be the one last in-person one. So we will take one more comment in person, and we'll take our one comment on Zoom, and that's our 15 minutes.
Hello, my name is Carlos. I've lived in Arcata since 2019. I moved 600 miles to be here and went from LA to a place where I could not see people like me. Centro de Pueblo was an opportunity to find a home away from home. And to see that home attacked, to see that home consistently brought into a place of fear has been hard. We oftentimes, when at the garden, are told by people passing by not to take it personally. But it is personal. It always has been personal. As much as we would like to pretend that Arcata is a safe place, sometimes it isn't. And that's especially true for people like me, people like my friends here. My question, I guess, because I know that the legislative body cannot adopt this, there are procedures, this cannot be put on the agenda today, but my question is, how much longer do we have to wait? What else has to happen before this is addressed? Does one of us have to get hurt before this is taken more seriously? I live just 2 blocks, not even 2 blocks away from the garden. I walk past there every day. What happens if me or Brenda or her husband or her child, God forbid, is outside when that man arrives? What happens if we are at the garden and he decides to do more? What if the vandalism is not the place where it ends, but the place where it begins? I am begging you, please, to do something. I do not want to live in fear in a community where I found so much love. And I hope that you can see that. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, we will take our commenter that's here on Zoom and then continue on.
Jane, go ahead, Jane.
Good evening, Jane Woodward. A couple quick things. I went down to the Prairie Festival to see how it was working. And I want to tell you, events like that are exactly what we had in mind for
Jane, we can't hear you yet.
creating. You can't hear me?
It's on.
You can't hear me? Why not?
Muted. Nor does
Hello?
she appear to be muted.
Can you hear me? Can you hear me?
Any
Hello?
thoughts, Juan?
Hello? Hello? Are you there?
Yeah, it is.
Can you hear me?
I'll turn it off and on again.
Hello? Can you hear me? Can you hear me?
It does.
Hello? Hello? Can you hear me?
Just in there. I could unmute mine, but that could go bad. Hold on.
Can you hear me? Hello?
Not yet, Jane, but we're getting there.
I can hear you. Hello, hello, hello.
Let's make sure that the speaker set it to the right input.
I can hear you and I turned my volume way up.
Hold tight, Jane. One more second. Or 10 more seconds.
Whatever it takes. That's one way of silencing the public.
All right, try again,
Hello,
Jane.
hello. Can you hear me now? Hello?
I could
Hello,
unmute me and
hello?
include my microphone.
Hello?
Jane, try again.
Hello? Can you hear me?
All right, let's
Can
try,
you
let's
hear
try
me?
this. Go ahead. Go ahead.
Can you hear me now? Hello? Hello, hello?
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, go ahead. You can hear me now?
Yes.
Yes. Oh, hallelujah. Over the weekend, I stopped down at the Fairy Festival, and I wanted... Pardon me? I'm echoing.
Yeah, that's going to be bad.
Okay, we are having technical difficulties here, Jane, so we might have to just come back to your comment at
Okay.
regular communications once we figure out what's happening with our speakers in the chamber here. We can hear you in the office, but we can't all hear you, so.
Oh.
All right,
Well, how long is that going to take?
that being said. Okay.
Can you hear me
God,
now?
but that just took up all of our 15 minutes. Okay. We're going to move on to our next item. Again, there will be time at the end of the meeting for 3-minute time period. No, sorry. That's the 15 minutes. We're keeping it just to respect everybody's time, respect all of our staff that's here to get through this meeting. And thank you guys for making your presence here. We hear you and thank you for being present tonight. And please feel free to email, call, reach out to all of us. Our phone numbers and emails are online, and we are available that way as well. So, all right. So the next item on our agenda is going to be the consent calendar. All matters on the consent calendar are considered to be routine by the City Council and are enacted in one motion. There's no separate discussion of these items, and if discussion is required, that item will be removed from the consent calendar and discussed separately. And so at the end of the reading of the consent calendar, council members or members of the public can request that an item be removed for separate discussion. And I do ask that if you are a member of the public that would like to remove an item from the consent calendar, that you please come up to the podium and then hang by to be able to discuss your item when the time comes. So item A, to approve the minutes of the City Council meeting of May 17th, 2023. B, biweekly report on disbursements. C, adopt resolution number 223-59, approving the fiscal year 2023-24 annual report on stormwater drainage maintenance fees for all non-tax exempt parcels and directing that fee to be collected through property tax rolls for fiscal year 23-24. Item D, adopt resolution number 223-58, approving the fiscal year 23-24 annual report on Measure A, special tax for all non-tax exempt parcels, and direct that fee to be collected through property tax rolls for fiscal year 23-24. Item E, approve the lease agreement between the City of Arcata and County of Humboldt for the Arcata Branch Library, and authorize the city manager to execute all applicable documents. Item F, award contracts for the 2023 timber sale to Humboldt Redwood Company for redwood logs, $848 per thousand board feet, and to North Fork Lumber Company for Douglas fir logs, $615 per thousand board feet, and Grand Fir logs, $415 per thousand board feet, and authorize the city manager to execute all applicable documents. And item G, to adopt resolution number 223-56, a resolution of the governing body of the City of Arcata, authorizing a joint request for amendment to the Grove Standard Agreement contract number 21-HK-17196. So are there any council members that would like to remove an item from consent?
I'd like to remove item G.
All right, item G. And if there are any members of the public that would like to remove an item from consent, or a member of staff that would like to remove item from consent. All right, so do we have a motion through items A through F?
Yes, I would so move.
I will second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second for items A through F. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay, motion carries unanimously, and that will take us to item G.
So I do understand why it's on the consent calendar, but I had a request from a constituent that it would be clarified. So I'm asking if you could do that.
Great. So can we get a brief staff report on item G and why we are seeing this again in front of us?
Yeah, thank you, Mayor and council members. The item is before you to correct some language. When we adopted this resolution originally, the state asked us to use their template. We pointed out to them that the template made it sound like we were applying when in fact we were amending to add Danco's entity that they'd created for operations of the project, and they said go ahead and use it anyway, and they've now changed their mind. Sorry, not Danco, for Arcata House Partnership. They've changed their mind. They've asked us to adopt an amended resolution that indicates that we're adding the entity as opposed to applying for those funds. So this is completely administrative. There's no change to the project. There's no change to the entities.
All right. Thank you, Director Loya. Do we have any other questions or comments from council, or do we have a motion for
I would so
item G?
move for item G.
I'll second.
Okay, so we have a motion and a second on item G. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, motion carries unanimously. Thank you, folks, for getting us through consent there. And all right, that'll take us to new business, which is item A, to review the proposed budget for fiscal year 2023-24. And this is going to be our initial review of the budget. And so this is our time that we can make requests for changes. But again, we will not be adopting this budget until the June 21st meeting. So it's the perfect time for us council members and the public to be able to give feedback, so we can make those changes before the final hearing and adoption at the June 21st meeting. And so we will start with a staff report from our finance director, Tabitha Miller.
Good evening, Mayor, Vice Mayor, City Council, and members of the public. Just want to briefly mention that this is your first review, and this is scheduled for a public hearing on the 21st, which would be your opportunity to adopt it. But if at any point in time tonight or over the next couple of weeks you feel that you need more time, we can certainly add work sessions or extend that public hearing out. So I want to make sure you're comfortable with the budget when we get to the final. So just quickly, this is the items that we are going to review this evening. I picked this picture because I really always hope that the state shows up with very large checks to give us. So it's a budget. That's kind of our opening. But we're going to take a quick view on the council goals, priorities, and priority projects to kind of put everything in context of what you're doing tonight, because that's really where the budget comes together. We'll do an overview of the numbers, which I will try not to be too tedious and too in-depth. The capital improvement program, we'll look at some of the projects and programs for this year. We'll take a look at the American Rescue Plan Act projects and some of those highlights. We'll talk about our plan for reducing the pension liability. We'll briefly talk about the potential for seeking new sources of revenue, and then just wrap it up with a summary of the appropriations limit, which is one of our requirements as a public entity to adopt every year annually. So I know that you all are very familiar with these, but I think it's really important because something that I found in putting the budget together, taking a look at where we were really spending the money, is that we truly are hitting these, and we're hitting them big in ways that are probably larger than many of the organizations I've worked for, as far as really being able to target your goals and the goals of the community. You know, we are, you know, you'll see when we get to the numbers that facilities and infrastructure is your single largest expenditure, and it surpasses the budgets that you've had just 2 years ago by itself. Certainly climate adaptation and change is something that you're addressing. Sustainable development is in there, but not as large. Public service, residential and community health, and then prepare for future needs is one that you really are addressing, and that's not just in planning for the infrastructure that's going to last 30 plus years, but looking at the financial stability and really making sure that we have that set aside also. I know you're also familiar with your council priority projects, but again, just really quickly wanted to make sure that we talk about them because again, there is a lot in the budget that really moves these forward. You know, we talk about a homeless strategy, Valley West improvements, collaboration for increased mental and social services, public safety, our relationships with our local tribal governments, economic development, future planning, arts, climate change and climate adaptation, parks, streets, our partnership with Cal Poly, going paperless, which is also climate-driven diversity, equity, inclusion, our capital improvement program support, which is huge, and then financial stability and sustainability. So again, I realize that when we get into the numbers, there are lots of numbers here and that they are fairly small. But I think it's important to take a look at, this is all of your funds. So this is your total budget, expenditures, revenues, and the amount that increases or decreases your fund balances. We are presenting 4 years to give you kind of a look at what's happened over the last few years, because what's changed is really important and gives you a lot of information on where we've been during the pandemic and coming out of it, and sort of where your priorities are. You'll see in the middle that you've got 2 columns that have fiscal year 2023, which is our current year that ends on June 30th, 2023. That middle column is estimated. That's what we're estimating that our actuals will come in at as of today. And then the fiscal year 2023 adopted is the budget that you actually adopted. So it's a comparison of where we think we're going to be and what we proposed as our spending plan a year ago. So I'm going to drop to the bottom, which is that black line, and that's the increase to decrease and decreases to fund balance. And you had an extraordinary couple of pandemic years, which is kind of, in retrospect, certainly not what we expected anywhere in local government, that you would be putting away a total of $13.7 million towards your fund balances. Those are huge numbers. Those are significant savings that you get to take advantage of, you know, in this next year's budget and going forward. It's between 19% in 2022 and 23% of your expenditure budget, which is just phenomenal. The other thing that I would point out is I went back and looked at the budget that you had originally adopted in fiscal year 2021, and it was $49 million. So you came in almost $14 million less. So obviously we understand the pandemic, but you really cut back services. You really sort of reacted to what was the unknown financial impact at that point in time. Moving over to your right-hand side, you will see by the negative numbers at the bottom there that for fiscal year 2023, we are going to use about $2.7 million of fund balance. That's approximately half of what you budgeted. So you're really coming in a little bit better there. And we are looking at spending $8.5 million next year of fund balance. So you are going to spend more than you bring in. But I think it's really important to jump back to sort of the top line under revenues, intergovernmental, and the top line under expenditures, which is your capital outlay, for two reasons. One is that, just as I mentioned earlier, capital outlay at $43.7 million is just phenomenal. And just as an example, I worked for a city one year, and I felt like we had a huge capital budget. Our operating budget was $105 million, and our capital budget was $45 million. It was a third. Yours is 54% of your total budget, which is gigantic. And the really impressive piece is when you go back to the very top under revenues, that intergovernmental number, far right-hand side under fiscal year 2024 requested. Of that $36.9 million in intergovernmental revenues, only 2.5 is reoccurring. So you have $34.4 million that is coming in to pay for those improvements and those infrastructure and those capital investments, which means that we're paying about 20% of it. And so we are getting a lot of bang for our buck this year. And I want to give kudos to, because this all happened before me, I can't take any credit at all. But the staff that put those grants together, the direction from City Council to go after them, the city manager approval, this is a big deal. This is pretty important. And I think, like I said, that is really the message of this budget. A couple other things that I really want to point out because they're important. If you look at your second revenue from the top, charges for services, and you start from the left and move to the right, you'll see that it does increase sort of moderately every year, and that's really what's built into your water and wastewater rates. That's what you're building to pay for some of this infrastructure as we go forward. One of the areas that we'll talk about in a little while, but I think that probably will need to be addressed, is that if you look at your taxes, the third line down, you're not seeing any growth. And the problem is we are seeing growth in our expenditures and the bottom as far as our materials and services, and certainly our personnel costs have gone up. So that is certainly not keeping up. Everything else is pretty much in line. I'll drop back down to expenditures. Again, you can see the personnel services increasing from 21 and 22. In 23 and 24, we had some jumps, and those are really twofold. The first is that you're filling positions. You had some pretty significant vacancies in those pandemic years. And then obviously you're well aware of the fact that you've increased your wages to kind of meet the market and to try to make the city more. I'm not sure where that came from.
Searching anyway.
But to make it more competitive when you're seeking out those positions, and it also will include some of the increased costs for pension and health insurance. So I will go ahead and move to the next slide. Because the capital expenditures are such a big portion of your budget, I just kind of wanted to point out where those expenditures are happening. Obviously, the biggest piece is your wastewater. That's more than half at 52% or $22.6 million. The bulk of that, of course, is your wastewater treatment plant upgrade and several other projects. Second to that, your water, which is also 5.84 or 13%. So between those two, water and wastewater infrastructure is about 65% of that cost, which is right in line. Those are both very heavy, expensive capital programs to maintain. So we're going to move to the overview of the general fund. This pretty much should look the same as all funds, but it is specific to your general fund. And just a reminder that the general fund is important because it's where essentially most of your services live. And it's also the one that you have the most flexibility with the funding, so it becomes the most competitive when we talk about using those resources for programs and staffing and investments in the future. Again, you can look at the bottom. We'll drop right to that black line, which is your increase, decrease in fund balance, or how much your revenues exceeded your expenditures. Very much like all of the rest of your funds, the fiscal year 2021 and 2022, between the 2 years, you added $5.9 million to your fund balance. just to give you a perspective on that, that increased your fund balance within 2 years by 70%. So everything that you had saved up until that point over the years, you know, increased by 70% in just those 2 years. You can see by the adopted budget over to the right-hand side for 2023, we did anticipate and plan on spending some of that, a little bit on some of that was on capital and a few other expenses that were agreed to through the year. And we are expecting to spend about $800,000 additional above and beyond the revenues that'll come in 2024. But when you look at the whole picture together, your general fund is still very strong and very healthy and in a much better place than it was 5 years ago. So that is the good news. We've already talked about the taxes, but because the bulk of the taxes come into your general fund, you can see that third line down. Again, you're actually less than flat. You're down a little bit, and that's kind of the trend that we're seeing with our sales tax and our TOT, and the property tax, which is sort of that makes up the difference there, just doesn't increase enough each year to make up for those other reductions. The intergovernmental, I just want to give a shout out because we had that check at on the first slide. Essentially, the increase that you're seeing between the previous years and fiscal year 2024 is the $2 million that we received for Carlson Park. So, you know, we have to be thankful again for that. And everything else is pretty much in line. We are moving a few revenues through interfund charges and transfers from funds, and you'll see a little bit of an increase there. When you get back down to the expenses, just like everywhere else, but not to anywhere near the extent, you've got a bump in capital outlay. And again, that really is Carlson Park. It's that extra money that we received this year that we get to spend. We'll see about $1 million increase in our personnel services. And again, that's really hoping to be fully staffed on top of some of the increased in wages for bettering our recruitment process. And the rest of it is really pretty consistent with where we've been. So your special revenue funds, these funds are probably going to be the ones that are going to go up and down the most from year to year. And most of your special revenue funds are funds that you receive from other governments. And most of it, almost the bulk of it, is going to be in grants. So it's going to be one-time money, or it's going to be money that you're going to see for 1 year or 2 years. There's very little reoccurring revenue in these funds. So you can see just looking at your expenditures, kind of the ups and downs. And because we got a lot of money sort of during and after COVID, our 23 and our 24 budget years are significant as far as expenditures. Quite honestly, I think we will see a trend in 24, 25 and going forward where those numbers will probably drop off. I think everybody's aware that the federal government is starting to cut back and even talking about clawing back some of the COVID relief. Our state went from a very nice surplus of $102 billion, and now they're for even just next year, they are projecting, I think the last number I heard was $32 billion, but that has even changed. It's increased over just the last few months in their projections. So those are, because that's where we're getting those funds, I think we're going to see a decrease there. But again, this is money that's one time. It's money we're supposed to spend. So using up and spending, almost $3.5 million this year as far as a negative is a good thing. We're moving forward. There's probably not a lot to say about wastewater other than, again, that this is where we're spending all that capital. So you can see just, if you look, starting on the left-hand side, the intergovernmental revenues, you can see how much money is coming in from outside entities to pay for our capital. And if you look at that first line under expenditures, which is certainly, by far the largest number in that budget, is, the $22.6 million. The bulk of it is being paid for by outside funds, and we are using a little bit of the fund balance that you have saved up. And our wastewater fund, you've been very good about, the council has been very good about making sure that the rates kind of meet the needs on a long-term, ongoing basis so that we do have the infrastructure in place that's necessary. The water fund, not to anywhere near the extent of your wastewater utility, has a very similar picture. You can see that you had very little capital investment during the COVID years, and you've certainly increased that with the highest number being this next fiscal year for 2024. You can see that we are we gained some fund balance here in 2021, 2022, and we are using more than we gained, but you had a pretty good capital reserve set aside for this very purpose. You've been planning on this is long-term planning. This is the last of my very busy slides, so I'll get through it. We're going to start on the left-hand side with the estimated fund balance for the end of this next fiscal year, or excuse me, the end of this year. You're looking at a total of about $55.5 million, which, again, when I just went back a couple years to kind of take a look at where we were at, this number has fluctuated in the last few years from a low of projection of just over $20 million to about a high of 40. So you're in really solid, good shape, and it kind of reflects that pattern. As you are aware, we are going to, if you look at the total revenues, it's $72 million. You're spending 80.5, so you are spending about $8.5 million above what you're bringing in. And really, if you look at that second line down, your special revenue funds, you can see, and those are predominantly grants, you can see that about $3.5 million, or almost half of it, is coming from that there, and that's what you would expect. The remainder, there's a small amount in your general fund, and the remainder is really your utilities. There's one other place that I'll point out, because I think we'll need to talk about it a little bit in this budget season. The third from the bottom, stormwater, you can see that we have very little fund balance coming into this year. It's $110,000, and you can see that we are going to be spending about, probably about $300,000 more than we are bringing in, and you will end up with a deficit of $180,000 if we meet budget at the end of the year. The reason that beginning number for stormwater, the fund balance isn't more negative, is that the city has been basically subsidizing that enterprise fund or that utility for a number of years. The revenues just don't meet the expenditures. The NPDES permit that we are essentially required to meet the expectations of, we just don't have the revenue. And part of the reason I mentioned it, and part of the reason that we've shown it with the deficit and not subsidized it right away, is so that everyone understands that this is someplace where we're probably going to have to look at finding some additional revenue. And I anticipate that a rate study and that process will be coming forward, and potentially we will be looking at ways to make sure that we can meet that expectation. Again, because this is so capital driven, I thought I'd start talking about the capital projects. And this is really your future planning and your support for your capital project program. The top four items here, you've got your wastewater configuration construction, which is by far the largest, $17.6 million this year. The sewer inflow and infiltration reduction program, and this is pretty exciting. We got a grant that I don't know that everybody thought we would get, so it's not out of the local customers' pockets. Your water line improvements, water storage, finishing tank 1C, $4.5 million for Old Arcata Road, your annual pavement maintenance, which I think is every other year, but that's a pretty substantial investment and does include some ARPA funding. Your sustainable transportation infrastructure project, because I don't think anybody's talked about it much, I also wanted to point out it's a small dollar item, but the Arcata Ballpark Improvement Program of $250,000. And then, of course, the Carlson Mad River Park Trail, this year's expenditures of $1.8 million. And a complete list of your capital improvement program is on it starts on page 24 of the budget document that was part of the agenda packet. These are programs, and this is just a select list, but I really wanted to highlight because these really do meet many of the goals and priority projects that you've set for the year. And I think it's important to acknowledge these programs. The first one is your police recruitment. We stepped up and put together and have budgeted for pretty significant bonuses to try to increase the number of officers that are on the street and working for the city. And so we'll start that process. You are continue to support implementation of a climate action plan with your environmental outlook, supporting Arcata House partnership and seeking grants to extend the safe parking program. Just as a note, the ARPA funds will carry that through September, and then those funds will be spent. Implementing the citywide rental inspection program, and this really also supports, in addition to the tenant protection policies, not just all of your citizens, but it also, is a good, furthers your relationship with Cal Poly and the student bodies that are coming in there. Paperless council meeting packets, solar and electric upgrades to the community center, coordinating efforts on the Arcata Chinatown project through Equity Arcata. Just a reminder that this is a project that will be finishing up, but you'll be opening your second home key in this next fiscal year, talking about your homeless strategy, and then just simple, and you can kind of see the bus outline in the back there, but securing funding for free bus service this summer is also just a project that isn't going to show up from a budgetary standpoint, but it's a big one. Which leads us to the American Rescue Plan Act. Just a reminder, you received $4.4 million. You have initially allocated all of the projects for that. A few of them are listed here, including some of the minor changes that we're making this year. We anticipate that there'll probably be another half a million dollars that will come back to you at mid-year budget next year for probably reallocation or looking at how to ensure that we spend those funds before the end of the calendar year 2024. Again, these are funds that there's some talk about trying to claw them back, and we want to make sure that we have properly spent them and we don't lose them. The Valley West Neighborhood Support was the #1 project listed on your ARPA funds. That's supporting CUNA. I'll mention this here and down below. It also, we've set aside $175,000 for the Woodsman Hall in Valley West for a community center, potentially a police annex, meeting space, and other office space. And so that will probably come back to the council shortly. You set aside quite a bit of money for economic recovery, and there's some projects built into the budget next year, this next coming up year, Playhouse public art programs, the Green and Gold Corridor, and then we have suggested, and this was a staff recommendation, that the Film Commission receive a one-time contribution of $20,000 to support their efforts. The safe parking program, as I mentioned just on the last slide, will continue through September, but the funding will be completely used up by then. Climate change adaptation, sorry.
Searching again?
Yes. So the climate change adaptation measures. I mentioned Woodsman Hall, and then one thing that has changed is that we have we've moved money to city staffing, and this is the 5 positions that you all funded last year that had been laid off or had been set aside for saving budget. We are asking to continue that into this second year. We've got $200,000 new reallocated dollars and $150,000 that would be a roll forward. But this is also a fairly simple, easy way to spend those monies, and something that if we run into an issue in this next year spending down these funds, it may be a place that we can spend the money and then set aside other general dollars to make sure that your projects get completed. The MIST program second year, and of course the Community Ambassador project will also complete its second year this next year. So I'm going to shift gears a little bit. The CalPERS unfunded liability, I did not include in that $80.5 million because I wanted to make sure that we separated it out. It's also talking about the $7.5 million investment that we've discussed with the council prior to this is a big number, and I want to make sure that we kind of set it aside and we talk about the fact that it will be using fund balance, and it is an investment in our future, and certainly will save more money than it cost. So it is a good thing. Something that's come up the several times that we have talked about the CalPERS unfunded pension liability in the past is sort of the idea that this might be unique to Arcata. And honestly, I kind of wish it was, because this is a statewide issue. You know, our school systems, our state governments, and then many of our local public agencies are all in the same boat that we are. This is a selected list that I kind of put together just to give you an idea of sort of how we stand. I will tell you that it is as of June 30th, 2021. And so if you remember back to what Ira talked to us about a couple times, it does not factor in the 6.1% loss that happened in 2022. So when you look at the total unfunded liability number here, unfortunately, you probably need to increase all of those by about a third more. And the funded status would probably drop somewhere between 8 to 10 percentage points. So this was what's available to us because it's the most current information CalPERS presents, and I wanted it to all be equal. But it's sort of an interesting picture of sort of where everybody else stands. Just a few comments on some things that I'm aware of. I picked the top one, San Luis Obispo City, because I thought, oh, they have another Cal Poly. I'm curious, but they certainly, I would assume they're a little more progressive. They seem to have a bigger community and more funding to pull from, but they're pretty low funded at 70.1%. City of Eureka, I wanted to just show some of our other local entities. Humboldt Bay Fire and Joint Power, you can see that they're at 77.1% funded. Humboldt County has almost a $250 million unfunded liability. That's 78.5% funded. Oroville, Dixon, and Arroyo Vista and American Canyon were all entities I picked because they were about the same size. And again, they're all within 10 points above and below us. Two that stand out at the very bottom of the list, the City of American Canyon, it looks like they're in great shape, which is wonderful. When I looked them up, part of the reason for that is that they don't have their own police department. They contract with the county sheriff, so they're not carrying that debt on their books. And then the City of Ukiah is 103% funded, which is awesome, but they issued about $50 million in bonds back in 2021 and paid off their debt. So they paid it off with CalPERS, but they still have a payment, a debt obligation on their books. So just a reminder, this is not new from what we've recommended at the last time we talked about pension liability. We are proposing that we make a $5 million one-time payment to CalPERS. It would be funded from the general fund, water, and then wastewater based on the employee representation there. In addition to that, we are suggesting that we establish a 115 trust and we make an initial deposit of $2.5 million. The nice thing about this is that it pledges that money towards our pension, but it has the flexibility that we get to decide if and when we pay CalPERS that money. So it allows us to sort of add to our reserves in the sense that we've got $2.5 million set aside in a fund. It's earning more interest than it would if we kept it in our city treasury. But we could offset our annual obligation to our pension contributions at any point in time that it became necessary. By also opening up this account, it gives us a place that if we have any other years going forward where we might have a surplus or we feel like we can spare a little bit of money, we can set it aside. But we haven't completely lost control of it, and it gives us, again, an additional reserve. It will stay on our books as an asset as opposed to just paying CalPERS where it's gone. The second piece of this is the fresh start. We'd like to re-amortize, pay that off, and then re-amortize our unfunded liability out 15 years. It cuts it a little bit shorter, but it does save us quite a bit of interest. And then we would target paying that off in 10 years. But that gives us, again, that flexibility that if we have a bad year, we wouldn't necessarily pay the additional $300,000. And if you remember, that $300,000 is coming from funds that we set aside for our insurance benefit. That has just been sitting out there not earning much money, and so we would offset that in order to not have to dip into additional fund balance. In addition to that, we would recommend that as a part of this next year's process, we develop a funding policy, and then every year going forward during this period of time when we take a look at our budget, we would look at the pension obligation, we'd reevaluate what we're paying, where we're at, and have an opportunity to sort of revise that plan as we go forward. So this talks about sort of one of the priority goals and the discussions that we've had regarding the potential for new and additional revenue sources. We've had a few conversations about the potential for taking a transaction use tax ballot measure to the voters in the spring of next year in the primaries. And at this point, staff is recommending that the City Council direct the Transaction and Use Tax Oversight Committee to review and evaluate potential ballot questions. This would give a group that otherwise only has a mandatory meeting once a year a real goal, a real mission to dig into this issue and to really look at what's the right amount, what do we need, what does the public actually want to fund and what would they support, the process that we would go about that, and then even the piece about education. How do we educate the public and the voters about why we're asking for it and what it would be used for? Just as a reminder, about every quarter cent is worth about $850,000 in annual income, and we have capacity in our sales tax to go up 2.75% more, which is about $2.55 million. We keep talking about a recession, and I pay attention to the Wall Street Journal regularly to try to keep in touch with what's happening. And I looked last weekend on their economy page, and these were 3 headlines that hit me. And the ironic part is that the first 2 are completely opposite opinions. One basically says that we have such a strong labor market, we're far from recession, we're not there, it's not going to happen anytime soon. The second one says that basically we're already there, despite the fact that we have good, strong employment. And then the third one talked about kind of the West Coast and specifically California and some of the challenges we're having locally that we're certainly being harder hit right now with the downturn. And a lot of that's being, targeted on the tech boom and bust that's happened. But it also, in reading that article, gave me some insight to a question that at least 1 or 2 of you asked during our individual meetings, and that was sort of what happened with the state budget, that it shifted so quickly and sort of seemed like it was a little bit, like overnight. We went from $102 billion surplus to what is right now a $32 billion deficit. And what it really happened is that what I looked at is that our state budget is very dependent on personal income taxes. And we tax the rich. And of that, about 50% of our income in that category comes from 1% of taxpayers. So we're talking about people who are probably very dependent on high wage earnings, but also stock market investments. So when there are downturns, particularly in the tech industries, those earnings get hit pretty hard. And that's really where that happened. And this graph just happens to show you the average weekly wages changes in 21-22 from the prior year in select counties. But you can see that the largest decrease in wages happened in San Francisco County. The second one was San Mateo County, and third was Santa Clara, some of our most wealthy counties in this state. So it gives you a little insight as to why that happened so quickly. These are 2 graphs that I pulled from the California Legislative Analysis Office. They basically do revenue updates periodically, and on the left-hand side, you can see the impact of the personal income taxes in 2022, the big change that happens. We lose about, I think it's 20 billion, dollars right off the bat. And that's really what's driving that big shift. And if you look at the graph, which is, I know, hard to read, but I couldn't get it any bigger, the personal income tax withholding you can see how dramatically it has dropped over the last couple quarters. And that's just the withholding. That's not folks even yet getting to the point where they've figured out their taxes. This is just in anticipation of not having that same level of earnings. So it kind of highlights how quickly and how dependent our state budget is on our high wage earners. So kind of wrapping it up with our last sort of requirement, the appropriations limit or the GAN limit is something that we are required to do every year by June 30th. It's a fairly simple calculation. Basically, we take our appropriation limit from the previous year, and we're allowed to adjust it for an inflationary or price factor and an increase or decrease in the population. You can see the calculation here. We get to increase it about $1.6 million. It puts us just below $20 million for our limit for the upcoming budget year. Something that is new this year, and it's the darker line, about 2/3 of the way down, add back State of California subvention. So this is new. So in 21-22, the state ran into a problem where they were exceeding their appropriation limit and basically needed to move some revenue to other local agencies. They looked at the cities that had capacity, who basically were well below their limit, and the city of Arcata was one of them. So they have allocated $4.9 million that they are kind of shifting to us, that we've been asked to pick that up. The good thing is that we do have the capacity. You can see the adjusted appropriation, subtracting that out, is just over 15 million. Our revenues that are subject to the appropriation limit are about 13.5 million, so we do have about a 1.5 million buffer there. And we'll watch that to make sure that we don't end up getting in trouble because that money was moved over. The state has said that if we run into an issue where we can't meet our appropriation limit, we can essentially tell them to take that money back. So. Almost. It doesn't necessarily make a lot of sense to me either, but.
And just to make it clear, that's not actual money that the state is giving us or taking away from us. It's just that from an accounting perspective, we are only allowed to spend up to that limit. And the state has exceeded how much it could spend. It has hit its limit. So it's saying, okay, let's take this 100 million that we're over and let's make it be counted on different cities' books. And they targeted cities where they've given a lot of grant money. We gave you all of this revenue, but you've got to count some of this against your limit. So that is not actual dollars going back and forth.
And it is something that, it will be interesting to see with their deficit position. This could be re-looked at pretty quickly and may change even. While doing that calculation, one of the things that we get to adjust for is, as I said, population. And I thought this was interesting. This is all of the entities, including unincorporated county and Humboldt County. And as you can see at the top line, we are the only jurisdiction that increased our population in the last year. But I thought that was interesting. And kind of wrapping up my piece of the presentation, just a few other things that I would ask the council to consider and make a decision on before we adopt the budget, is we do have a request for approval for a project manager, assistant engineer. This would be funded with some of our grants, particularly our capital project grants. And there is sort of a chicken and an egg here in that in order to get those projects done, we really do need the additional staff resources to get the work done. So it is something that is being recommended. Again, I mentioned this earlier, just keep in the back of your mind the idea of shifting ARPA funds so that we make sure that we use those and spend those. I kind of wanted to mention also that I feel pretty good about where the city stands this year in fiscal year 23-24, excuse me. 24-25 does have some challenges, and I just kind of want to paint a picture so we can start looking out a little farther. If you remember, we've got that $1.3 million increase in our CalPERS pension contributions, and the challenge here is that no matter what we do this year to pay those down, because the actuarials and their calculations are always 2 years behind, we won't see the results of that until 25-26. So we will end up with a year where we end up increasing those funds. Again, I also think that the revenues that we've been able to get from state and federal programs are probably not going to be as readily available. And then just making sure that we can meet some of the increased cost of materials, supplies, and even our labor. And then just the future stormwater resources. I think we need to keep that on the radar as far as something to address. And with that, I'm open for council questions. And obviously, at the end of this process, we're hoping to get your direction on anything you'd like to see added, subtracted, or changed, or even more information.
Great. Thank you so much, Tabitha. All right. So I'd like to have the council start with any questions, things that need to be clarified. But before we really go into much discussion or comments or changings, I'd like to take public comment before we do that. So do we have any clarifying questions from the council?
Sure. First of all, thank you, staff, for all the grants. You guys, really kudos. So Tabitha, when we met to discuss the budget, we were talking about enterprise funds. Is there a screen that is there anything with, because I do understand, the importance of next year and making sure that we have reserves, and so I'm looking at enterprise funds like 661 through 666.
Yeah, so actually this slide probably, and I wasn't going to use this, but I had it, so I'll pull it up. So this slide I show sort of what we're recommending our reserves be. And one of the things that we are recommending is moving from 25% in our general fund stabilization reserve to 30%.
Yeah.
The other thing that I would propose, and you can see how it's broken down here, is that we, in our water fund and our wastewater fund, that we set our available fund balance at 100% of operating, which gives you some flexibility, and then basically place the rest of the funding into a reserve for capital. And the truth is, almost all the money you're going to spend in your water, wastewater funds above and beyond operating is going to be capital. So you can see sort of the fiscal year 2023 estimated fund balances, shows you where we would be and what would happen. The other thing, this just is sort of just to make sure that we keep in mind the one-time pension payments and then the money that we would place in the 115 trust. And you can see I don't have those as an outgoing. I have those netting out because they'll still be an asset on our books, and they'll still be available for limited use towards our annual pension payments. So is that, Vice Mayor Matthews, kind of what you were looking at?
Yeah, I'm sorry, my reading glasses are like wrong prescription, so. And then I think we were talking about the 770, the internal service fund too. Were we talking about like replacing vehicles? Is that something that's in the budget?
It is, and
Okay.
and I did glance over that. I didn't probably spend as much time as I should. So there's $1 million currently set aside for replacing vehicles in the current year. And when you look historically over what we've spent on vehicles over the last 5 years, we have spent as little as nothing replacing vehicles in a single year, 111,000, but our average has been more like 400,000 to 500,000. We're proposing $1 million this year. We are using some of the reserves that have been built up in that fund to pay for those. And then we've also added an additional kind of payment that all of the departments that use vehicles will pay in that adds up to $500,000 so we can start replenishing that replacement fund, and we have funds going forward. So it's another place to sort of make sure that we are planning for the future and making sure that we have the infrastructure and the assets that we need.
Yeah, and just to, I guess, remind everybody that, all of these specific funds have to be paid for things that are in these funds, right? So the only thing like extra is general funds. So the enterprise funds have to stay enterprise, yada, yada, yada. Correct?
Yeah, that's absolutely, yes. The way they're set up, we could potentially borrow, but we're not recommending it from those funds, but it's not like we can spend wastewater funds on police services.
Right. I'm going to let someone else ask questions.
First of all, thank you for taking the time to meet with us
one-on-one to go over this, that it offered a lot of clarification because this is a lot to absorb. So I appreciate you taking the time. I just have a couple questions. One, and I don't know what slide it was on, but it showed that for 2024 requested, I think it was money in the for the wastewater treatment plant, and it showed a negative 1.5 million. Do you happen to know what slide that was? And I guess I was just curious about it because I know that we're using primarily grant money to pay for the wastewater treatment plant, and we've, been doing well with that. So I was just wondering if you could explain that once you find what I'm talking about.
This is because I can't see because my eyes are old and I can't use my reading glasses don't help me. On the current slide, okay. So yeah, if you go to the far right bottom, you can see the $1.5 million. And we are using $1.5 million of fund balance here. And if you look, you can kind of see part of the reason why the intergovernmental revenue at the top under 2024 is $18 million. So that's the grants we're receiving that we're getting in. We still are spending some money out of pocket, and that's the $22.6 million. It's not, we still have an offset because of the revenues we're bringing in, but it's not quite enough to cover that year. So we are dipping in by $1.5 million, but a greater chunk of it is the vast majority of the capital that we're spending this year is being covered by that.
Okay, that makes sense, yes, because we were paying for a little bit of it.
Yeah, and you still have, on the last slide, you still have a fund balance of well over $20 million in your wastewater that would essentially be mostly set aside for your additional future capital needs.
Okay, and then it was mentioned that we might want to change our council policy from 25 to a 30% reserve. And I was just wondering if that's something that we're doing this evening, or we're waiting till we do the budget to make that decision.
If I get direction to do that, we'll go ahead. It is in draft format in your budget document. If we get the direction to do that, we would go ahead and transfer that. It's a policy. It's not actually an expenditure because the money is just moving from unreserved to reserved. But if you give me direction to do that, we'll build it into the process.
Okay, so we'll be talking about that tonight. All right, I think that's it for me. Thank you.
All right, any other questions from this side of the dais?
I'm brand new, so I'm mostly listening and learning. I just got a little bit confused on the TOT. So it shows that we're ahead this year over last year. Could you clarify that?
I can. So first of all, if you go back and look out to 2021 and 2022, we're down from those years. And that's not surprising. We've converted hotel rooms and hotels, and we've also had the influx of the Cal Poly. Built into those numbers, we added in the offset that we expect to receive from Cal Poly. They have made assurances that they will make up the difference for the hotel rooms that are being converted to student housing. Obviously we still have the loss of rooms from converting to the home key projects, but that's why that number is increased from 2023 estimated to 2024. So otherwise it would be lower, and it would be a negative number from this current year.
That would be in lieu fees from Cal Poly Hopewell.
Yeah, and it's, I believe we estimated $250,000, but that'll be finalized when we take a look at sort of exactly what number of rooms are used and how that impacts our overall dollars and if they shift.
And so we would go back and look at the 4 hotels and what we normally would get in a good year.
Yeah.
And then add to it.
Exactly. And the challenge, we are keeping it a little bit open in that we don't know by reducing the total number of hotel rooms available in Arcata, there's likely to be higher occupancy rates at the other hotels and potentially higher rates charged. So some of that could be offset as just part of the market.
And then also on the capital improvement projects, it said 1.8 million for the Carlson Park, and I thought we had like 2.5 million.
We do. That's the expenditures that are budgeted particularly for just this year.
Gotcha.
And certainly our environmental services director could expand on exactly what that entails, but it's because not all the money will be spent in fiscal year 2024.
Correct, because it's going to take some time to do this, and we
Yes.
only have like 6 months left. Well, I guess it's fiscal year.
It's fiscal year, so it's
Okay,
July
but
1st.
still, even a
Yeah.
year of what the big project that we're doing is going to take a little more time. I think that was it for me. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Microphone.
Turn on my microphone. So, I don't know if this is part of the budget, but one of the things I was really interested in is our Transaction and Use Tax Oversight Committee actually have an opportunity to meet with our Director of Finance and to have two of the members at least start to discuss our budget as she recommended, and so that we can get some recommendations back about what we should think about for the future. And when we get ready to do another tax, whatever we want to call it, we'll know where we should stand and we can get feedback. So that's something I think would be helpful for us for the future and help us in mid-year budget review if we could start that moving forward. So that's something I would suggest.
All right. Cool. So we have had a quick request for a restroom break. So we're going to take a brief 5-minute break and then we'll come back and we'll start with public comment on our budget. Oh, okay. Yes, questions? No? Okay. Great. And then we'll come back. 5-minute break. Then we'll come back. All right. All right, we're back. I believe we had a couple more follow-up questions that were brewing in our brain, and then we'll take it out to public comment.
Hi. Can we pull up ARPA funds? I don't know what page it is on. Mine.
Packet page 290.
290?
Or 104 of the document.
Ay, ay, ay. All right. So with this proposed 2024, all this is that's going to fully expend the ARPA funds?
Probably not. One of the challenges is that middle column, the fiscal year 22-23 budget, there's a lot of unknowns as far as what we've spent to date. There's a few challenges, and I don't believe that we will have spent the $2.9 million. In fact, I think it's probably going to be quite a bit less. Some of that has already been rolled forward into the 23-24 budget, but there's some things like the missed contract. We don't have any billings on that. We've got quite a few that we're waiting on other entities to bill us so that we know what we've spent. So we will probably have to bring it back at mid-year, but I suspect that there's probably about $500,000 that will come back to you as being sort of not spent that we'll have to reallocate.
Do you think there's maybe like $2,000 in there that we can give to Centro de Pueblo for security cameras?
Yeah, that's your decision.
So
Yeah.
my
Yes, there is
understanding
$2,000.
is that it was 5,000 is what they were looking for?
That's for cameras.
Right.
$5,000 is better.
Yeah, and I think kind of, and we can talk about this more, but I don't even remember who said it, but somebody at one point that I talked to said, kind of just, I don't know, the idea of like creating like a rainy day fund that like, a pot of like $15,000 to $20,000 that we as a council can kind of decide to spend on, things like when events like this happen and things come up, yeah, $5,000 for security system, or even smaller things like we did the Kinetic Award to be able to pay a local artist to do that, or something like that, to have like a little rainy day money to use for these things that come up throughout the year that we might not expect.
I might have brought that
valuable.
up because
Yeah.
I would like to call it probably a discretionary fund of some sort, that we would have so much money in it that we could use in special instances when we might need it, if the council agrees as a whole.
Yeah, I like that. We just have to have the caveat that we have to expend it by the end of 2024, because that's when the money.
Yeah, if you're going to use ARPA funds, but we can also, this is your budget, so if you tell us whatever dollar value you say you want to add into the council budget so that you have some of that flexibility for unknowns, emergencies, just, programs that come up through the year, we can certainly add that to the budget when it comes back to you on the 21st. And all I would need is, at least 3 of you to nod and agree to the amount, and we can take care of that. And then what I would suggest is that we can bring it back on consent calendar when you want to actually use those funds, so that you have a second chance as a council to just make sure that you're in agreement, at least as a majority, on how you spend those funds through the year.
And are the ARPA funds, is that the appropriate place to allocate those funds, or?
You could.
Okay, then I'd say.
And the only caveat, and we probably wouldn't run into this, but we'd want to be careful if there was anything, there aren't too many limitations on the ARPA funds, but we'd want to make sure we didn't hit any of those, but we'd check those before you spend them.
So, of course, I'm always try to be, I don't know why, conservative about it, but, you mentioned 20,000. I was thinking 15, at what, 5, 15, so somewhere we should come up with an amount so that we could give it to her tonight, that we could have an agreement on.
Yeah, and
15 sounds reasonable to me.
Yeah, 15 sounds super reasonable, and I was just going to ask too, just question-wise, where does that figure? Why is 20,000 the recommendation for the film commission? Just because comparing to what we had, I think, previously talked about, I don't know, why that much?
Again, that's completely discretionary number for the council. The number came as we were looking at how you were choosing to allocate into buckets, and you had monies allocated into economic development. And so given that they are working on a fairly major motion picture that should be coming and doing filming in Arcata this next fiscal year, in terms of actually, I mean, we will likely make back that money plus much more with that filming that'll be happening here. So of all the things that are coming out of the pandemic around economic development, that is one that's actively working on things that would bring money here. And so that's the only reason we moved it into that pot.
And in the past, in the past years, I remember that we used to give them an allocation of $5,000. And so, they're probably a really interesting way for us to have money that revolves around the entire county and cities when you have a film or any kind of advertising that's done, like car ads, et cetera, that happen.
And I just do want to make sure the whole council knows there still is that. It's not quite 5,000, but it's like 4,800 that is still in your budget towards them as well. So that is sort of their ongoing allocation. And yes, the county puts in a lot. I think Eureka is putting in 40,000 this year to the Film Commission, and the county does a little more than that.
So I just want to bring up today, when I was at HTA, that they were talking about the ARPA funds, the clawback, et cetera, and that they have figured out some ways to move things around. So you may want to have a chance to talk to their finance officer and figure out what she figured that they could do to make sure they wouldn't lose it because of where they would put it and how they were going to organize it. And she talked about, but I don't know where it went or how it was going to be handled exactly. But so if you wouldn't mind doing that, thank you.
But for now, I think we're all good on a $15,000 discretionary.
Yeah, that sounds good. And then, you know, here's our first discretionary thing. And then I know city manager's been in contact with some folks from Central Del Pueblo. So that is an ask that can come out of that money, whether it's 5,000 or whatever that ballpark for that security system is running. You know, that's a good use of that discretionary fund.
And also,
I see nods. So
Do we need a
that's
motion for
concessions.
this, or we're just nodding and we're good?
Because we're not going to adopt it until.
Gotcha.
Yeah,
Okay.
exactly.
So the
Consensus is
another
good.
example would be like the Ferry Festival. If they said they would like to have some of their funds offset with the city is permit, possibly we'd say, okay, we would offset it by $500 or $200 or whatever. So we have those kind of opportunities.
Do we have like a special permitting rate for things like that for nonprofit groups or for community groups that put on events like that?
Yes, good evening, Mayor, council members. We have a 20% discounted permit rate for nonprofits. And then we also have had grants in the past, like the COVID outdoor grants, that has supported having community events. Those are other grants that we could go after in the future as well. But those have been some of the funding supports for nonprofit events, which I know provide a great benefit to the community.
That was the question I wanted to bring up about permitting, as I do support when we can offsetting those, since we do have the extra money this year. But I was also just want to bring up, and I don't know how you will determine this, but I feel like it needs to be done in an equitable way, just like how we have the Arts Council now, so that we make sure that our, you know, the art is equitable. And I feel the same way about, you know, the event money.
Are we done with the discretionary ideas?
Okay, we got too into ideas and I really wanted to take it out to public comment before we got too bogged down with talking about our decisions, because we might hear some things from the public that might spark what we want to make some changes about, right? And so that's why folks are here. So I'd really like to open it up for public comment unless there are more clarifying questions of things we do not understand about the budget.
I do, thank you.
Okay.
So item number 5, I just was wanting to see if we could change the language. It says extend or expand, and I'm wondering if we could say and. Just thinking of expanding the ambassador program to North Arcata to Valley West. And then I was hoping to get some clarification on item number 4. I notice in 22-23, it's 227,000, and then it goes up this year, or the proposed 23-24 to 263,000. And I was just wanting to see if you could clarify, are we adding more ambassadors, or what?
So the reason for that, actually, that's a great question. The reason.
I'm sorry, missed.
Number 4 is for missed.
So I'm going to start with community ambassador, and then I'll go back to the mist. So the community ambassador program, the reason that the proposed budget is a little bit higher than half of it is because we have some funds that we won't expend the full $135,000 that was budgeted this year. So I included them next year. And so the question being, we want to keep those funds there. I know that's a very important program. So the question is whether or not it would be extending it, expanding it, and I don't know that I'm in a position to tell you how that would happen, but we want to have the funds available so that they stay within that program. So I think that may be a decision that we come back to you to clarify how we handle administration of that program next year. And it sounds like you're suggesting that maybe we extend it into Valley West.
Or even, North Arcata. So it just says or, so I was just thinking the language, if
or
we
is-
said and.
Yeah, I'm perfectly happy doing that. And like I said, it's really going to be kind of looking at the logistics of it, and there was some extra money there.
And yes, Valley West too, of course.
So is that program full? I remember that we didn't have, we did not have all positions filled. Is that true?
We've just added 2 positions, or we've just hired 2 new ambassadors, and so they will be going through training and then shadowing, and then they will be out working solo. The idea of expand or extend is that we believe we could get a few additional months. I don't suspect that with our initial pilot project ARPA funds, we're going to be expanding the program, but I do think if the council goes with Councilmember Stillman's request to have the Transaction and Use Tax Committee look at potential long-term funding sources, that look at expansion really needs to be something that they look at in that project.
So let me ask you this. When we're adding things to the budget, is that something that we can consider separate from the TUT tax so that we make sure that this does happen as opposed to waiting to see if that passes in March?
I guess I don't understand your question.
Sorry.
It's about where the money comes from too. And so, I mean, the idea that we would extend this tax is something that could really seriously fund a program that, costs this much. So we need to look for ways to bring in new revenue services revenue streams if we're going to continue to offer, these services that are new, or expand or extend these services that are new.
Right, yeah, no, I understand. It's just that with 400 new students coming in the fall, and with the other home key, another 90, we have 600 new people out there. And I feel like this is something that needs to come to fruition sooner than later. And I'm just trying to see if there's something that we can move around. I know that it is a lot, but we're talking about expanding onto the extension, right? So we're going to fund it anyway for 23, 24. But what we don't know is whether we're able to expand it. And so it's not going to cost $152,000 to add a neighborhood to it. And I'm wondering if we might, well, I mean, we'll take anything out there. So I'm just hoping that we can consider, because with all of the new residents out there, today there were 6 APD officers. The day before yesterday, we had another incident, and we really could use ambassadors, which are going to be less threatening with the students coming in who are people of color from out of the area. And I just feel like if we had more ambassadors out there, also, that would be a great opportunity to not have to have APD out there every minute of the day. So something to think about. And then I will let you answer my second question.
So the question you had on the mist was the difference between last year and this year. And what it is that we are funding Sergeant Scown's salary out of this line item, but we've also set aside additional funds for when we get billed by the county. Again, one of the challenges is because we have not been billed, I don't know what we've spent this year, and I don't necessarily know exactly what we're going to spend next year, but because we do have a total of $570,000 originally allocated, it's kind of a guess, and it may be something that we come back to at mid-year and adjust just because it's a guess.
So the other idea, if we get the taxation committee, or, I don't pronounce it with the little, well, anyway, if we have that, when we have to sell that program, or we talk about selling that program, and the ambassador program has been very successful, and that would be one of the things that we would be able to sell the program on to continue funding that kind of a ambassador program, not only in downtown, but also in Valley West. So I'm just giving you an idea of why I think it's really important for the finance director to get together with a couple of the members and start to chart what they want to do and how they want to handle this next year in order to come back with the information for us, and we know where to go.
Just because I'm new at this, so bear with me, and if this is redundant. We're looking at the TUT in March. So that means if we wait that long, our fiscal year starting now, we're not going to have anything happening for another year then, at least. For Valley West to acquire some ambassadors out there. I'm just really hoping that the council could see that this is something that might need to be a priority.
So just to be clear, because we've had this discussion up here before, and it's not just the money, it's the development of the program. And I had I'm the one that brought the program to the council and really sold it. So I'm like, yes, and yes, I want it everywhere. But when I went to Chief Ahern to discuss the possibility of expanding it, it was actually a couple months ago, we talked about could possibly threaten the program because we haven't worked out the bugs. It's not ready yet to go full out. So we're still keeping it small, not just for the money, but to really get the program developed so that as we roll it out in other areas, it will be successful and we won't lose the program, because there have been other programs in the past that didn't stick because they just didn't get the bugs worked out and they weren't successful. So it's just really important to me that we be, prudent. I mean, I know we have so many things pressing on us. So for me, it's not just the finances, it's also the readiness of the program. And the chief has shared his opinion that it's not ready to be expanded yet.
Yeah. And Chief, do you want to add anything on that topic?
Well, we'll do what the council would like. But Councilmember Atkins Salazar, brings up a good point. We've seen in our profession so many programs that just fail because they try to expand too quickly. And what we're trying to do is really establish a very we need a training program that is, we're constantly tweaking that. The de-escalation side of it is still something that Sergeant Scown is working with our current ambassadors on. There's always going to be challenges for scheduling, for example, because it's similar to the satellite office for the PD and I realize we're going to be up in Valley West at some point, and I've seen this happen before in other areas of California where the expectation is now that we have a satellite office is that you're going to be there. So my fear is if we grow the program too quickly, we may not be able to staff it in these newer areas at a level that the community is expecting. And then we may be asking too much of our current ambassadors. So having said that, I do agree that the program has really worked well. There's really a lowering of the temperature on the streets of Arcata, and I attribute that to two things, is all of the sheltering options that you have stood up for our homeless individuals and because of the community ambassadors. So I think the program is definitely working, and I do see the need to expand it into Valley West. We will try to meet whatever timeline you place upon us, but we still are growing the program. To the city manager's point, we just hired on 2 people for the vacancies that we had. So I'd like to see how they developed through the training program, and if it's something that they even continue, to work with us on. But certainly doable. I just think trying to figure out the best time to do it is our biggest question.
That makes sense to me. Thank you for the clarification. And I did notice in the priority goals that we have prioritized trying to get our dedicated Valley West officer out there, possibly another one. So, yeah, so we got our bases covered. I just really am excited at the wonderful job that we're doing with the ambassador program, and we will wait in anxious anticipation for that to get the wrinkles worked out, and when it's ready, we'll receive.
Yeah, and I think that is in its own separate agenda item to kind of discuss that program and how it's developing and get feedback from, the folks that are on the ground. I know we had that a couple months ago, but it was still very fresh at that point. And once, we're able to dig into it a bit more, separate from the budget piece.
So I would like to support what has been said, because I've experienced other programs that we've had on the plaza that didn't succeed. And for one reason or another, it escalated, and everybody just quit. And so we don't want to be in a situation like that. And this has been slowly working, and we need to establish it that way and not have what we've had in the past.
Okay, these lovely people are waiting in line, and I'd like to open it up for public comment, and I think they're going to give us some good food for thought. So again, these are comments that relate to the budget, so make them relate to the budget. Okay. 3 minutes. The floor is yours.
To the budget, obviously. Yeah, so I'm Mashika Anawak, and I don't know what brought me here, but ultimately my goal is to create some clarification for the community, So we're just asking for safety and why are these people pestering us, that's a plain and simple question, And so these community ambassadors, are they police force, or are they a different community ambassador? Are they the Equity Arcata or Equity Community Arcata ambassador that is listed on your part-time job duties right now?
It's the folks in the green vests.
What is the folks in the green vest? Okay, so that's not the Equity Arcata, right?
But again, this is your time to talk, so we're not going to do it really back and forth.
It's okay.
It's not question time.
I'm down for ping pong. It's all good. No, I'm down for ping pong. I was going to say that, so ultimately, my name's Elias, and I'm a student with the Cal Poly. I started here in 2016, and I wasn't there at the party when Josiah Lawson died, but, we're still missing him, and this is a reflection of that, I feel. So, Equity Arcata. What's that part-time duty? What's that part-time job, Lasso Kamati.
Good evening, members of this council. My name is Magali, and I'm here not just as member of Centro del Pueblo, I'm here as a friend for my friend. I'm concerned for her safety. I'm concerned for all our safety. We are hard work people. We harmless. We deserve better. We don't deserve be humiliated like this way. As we had enough of these treatments. That garden is for me like part of my hometown. It's a little bit of my hometown. We have a lot community in there, a lot friendship. And also, I'm concerned for all the students. They live in home, or homes are far away, and this garden make home for us. So, please help us to stop this crime. And we don't nothing what they put. The graffiti says we're not that kind of people. We are hardworking people. Sorry, I'm nervous. We have the line time and the names of all the crimes.
Yeah, so I just want to name some of the occurrences that have happened, just so, for you to consider where the money is going and what it's going towards, because we don't want to, have anything to do with this. It started in 2022. July 21st, America USA was vandalized on our sign. A month later, our corn was cut. And if you don't know about corn and our people, please do a little research. That is who we are. That's how we're here. Again, in October, the corn was vandalized once more. October 25th, we had a ton of garbage dumped at the entrance of the garden. February 26th, again, the sign was vandalized with graffiti. They changed the lock of the garden gate. The kiosk was vandalized and completely thrown to the ground.
This is some of the samples were being treated, and I just want demand at least a safer, better cameras and alarm system for us. And also, I want to invite you to come to our garden and help us to clean this mess.
Thank you.
On Saturday? Wednesday.
Wednesday and Saturday.
Wednesday
So
and
Wednesday from
Saturday.
3 to 6 and Saturday from 10 to 12.
Okay.
This Wednesday.
Okay.
This Wednesday, 3 to 5.
Okay. Thank you.
Hi, all. I wanted to start first by saying, Meredith, thank you for bringing that up. It is good to see this being addressed. And I also have to say, in all honesty, that it is deeply concerning that it has had to come to this point to be addressed. This has been happening since July of last year. You just heard a list of all the things that have been happening over and over for the last nearly a year now. I was here at the last city council meeting saying, hey, this has already happened 8 times. And I saw many sad nods and, oh yes, that's too bad. And since then, we've had at least 2 more occurrences. So I thank you for the action you have taken now. But I note that in the budget presentation, there are notes of the council priorities, including public safety and equity, diversity, and inclusion. A wiser man than me, Senator Portantino, State Senator Portantino, once wrote to the governor this year, actually, that a budget is a moral document. It is not just numbers. It is a moral document that is a promise to your constituents, the priorities that you are taking to keep them healthy, to keep them well, to keep them safe. So again, I thank you for the action taken now, finally, but I also implore each and every one of you that it does not end now. This has to be a continuing, ongoing effort to address an ongoing crisis in our community. That, as has been noted here before, it affects not just everyone here, including my friend Brenda, who lives right there, but also every BIPOC student that we are bringing into our community, and many of who I talked with as I was an instructor at HSU, sorry, Cal Poly now, my bad. They couldn't wait to leave this town. They were counting the days. We have to do something about that. I would also encourage all of you, in addition to all the other actions that Centro has already requested here, the city of Arcata is entirely within your power to form a task force. You have formed in the past to address crises. This is a crisis. So please take that action. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening. A question that I've asked, probably this is the about 3rd time, directed towards finance and the budget, is back in October, Kimberly wasn't on the council at that time, but you approved of phase 1 of the wastewater treatment plant. I believe it was $52 million. You had a little bit in case they came back and needed a few more million. So I think it was just a little bit under 54 million that was approved by you. And I brought this up a number of times, and our financial director then, it's 2 different times, has said it's now $62 million. So my question is, why isn't that anybody's even curious about in explaining why, it went up from 54 at the max to $62 million? And I mean, I don't know whether this is a government thing that nobody really is too concerned about it, because if you're in the private sector, I mean, you'd have to have an answer to this. And, I'm just surprised that, of all the millions of dollars, nobody has an answer. I've asked this, and basically it's like, you asked a lot of questions, don't worry, this is a grant, it's 90% of it's paid by a grant. And I'll remind you that the federal government is the one that sends us the money for these grants, and it's $33 trillion deficit that we just about defaulted on like a week ago. So it's, we're all citizens of the US. We should be asking, where did this money go? What is the reasons why that it exceeded your authorization back in October? So you need to be asking that question. You need to explain to the public too that because of 90% of it is being paid by a grant, and you collected from the taxpayers for increase in water and sewage, you told them to pay for this phase 1, and the grant is paid for 90% of it, and you're using $5 million of it now to pay for the pension fund. I'm sure the majority of the people out here don't know that you're using $5 million to pay for the pension fund. And I think what happens when you get into leadership, obviously your salary's in the 6 figures. So it's, no, I'm not talking about you. I'm talking about, you think I'm talking about you guys? No, I'm on your side about that. I'm addressing this table over here. Everyone's a 6 figure. But so it's, people are basically, living paycheck to paycheck with their rent, for their utilities. So it's like you really need to explain to these folks out in the general Arcata why you're increasing their rates and you're using it for your pension.
I want to keep reading the timeline. It's related to the budget at the end. In 2023, we started in February with a vandalized sign with a graffiti. And then in April 12th, the new cameras and light motions were stolen. In May 9, we have a vandalized sign saying USA Trump. In May 25, we had the broken gate and a person trying to steal cameras using ladders. We have the image. And the police has the image as well. In June 1st, somebody stole the rest of the cameras in the garden and put a gate and a lock in the new gate. I put a chain and a lock in the new gate. Finally, in June the 2nd, the sign was vandalized again with a sign saying USA. It's hard for me to read it, even if I've been practicing English for 6 years now. It's hard for me to read it because this is a space that we've been fostering, and this is a space I'm neighbor of, and a space we've been working to transform. I have some ideas for you to use in that budget. The sign has been vandalized in multiple occasions because it's multilingual, because it includes the Sulaluk, the Wiyot language. It includes the Mixteco, indigenous language from Oaxaca. It includes Spanish and English. So provide access to multilingual people. Use that budget and those signs and in those campaigns to make it in several languages, so we are not targeted. So the person that is doing this knows that this city provides safety space for everybody that speaks several languages. Discuss racism. I hear there is a film commission, maybe a campaign in media can become to discuss how racism is a public health crisis, and we are in a crisis. We have so many attacks so far that is becoming a problem for our health, physical and mental. In the vandalism of June 2nd, my house space was trespassed by this person. I don't feel safe even for gardening. I have a baby, I don't let her out. I ask you to highlight the sanctuary garden as an important space so that this person that is committing hate crimes knows that you are in our side, that you are allies. I want to thank every volunteer. The only reason I'm here and I feel safe is because they are here today with me, because they are in the garden every Saturday and Wednesday. And I want to see you visiting the garden and doing something, take action. Thank you. And I want to give you this as a proof so you have a copy and please do something.
Thank you, Brenda.
Hola, hi, my name is Angela Verdín. I'm a member of the community. I also am a volunteer at El Centro del Pueblo, and I am a student at Cal Poly Humboldt. I just want to talk about how I'm originally from the Bay Area, so coming here, it took me a long time to find places where I felt safe, and El Jardín Santuario is one of those places that I have found. To see that it has been vandalized, it breaks my heart. It really makes me question because of some of the statements that we've made today. These people are hardworking. These people are harmless. They don't bring any hatred into the community, and for them to receive that is very confusing for me. And so if we're talking about budget, one of the things that I wanted to bring up, thank you. I heard some of your comments talking about how you want to reinstall some of the surveillance and maybe separate some part of the budget out for us to be able to strengthen that and find different ways that we can have alarm systems set up and cameras replace the ones that were vandalized or, that were taken down. One of the other things that I think I heard one of our compañeros, one of our friends, speak about is some sort of strengthening or creating a sort of system that is a part of the community. In our country, we deal with a lot of issues when it comes to police, and so I feel like having more of that may not necessarily be what we're looking for, but when problems arise in our community, it's time for our community to come together, to strengthen, to find ways that we can help each other. And so maybe creating positions that allow for that to be available, creating positions that help the community come together and find ways to be able to help each other, one another, whether that's a neighborhood watch, whether that's someone who is organizing that sort of thing, whether that is us looking for ways that the community can help each other with this problem. I feel like that would be something that would be really helpful. We need to be able to trust each other and come together and help each other, and us being able to do that in strength in numbers is how we're going to be able to get through this. So thank you so much for your time. I appreciate it a lot, and I hope that you put into consideration ways and brainstorm ways that we can continue to help each other, because it's not just about us. There was a place down the street of the garden that got vandalized not that long ago, maybe less than a week ago as well. So we're not the only ones that are, receiving this sort of behavior. And so helping the community as a whole will be super, super, super helpful. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.
Hello, it's me again, Kate B. I've been living here for 13 years. I graduated from Cal Poly 10 years ago. I almost moved away, but I thought, I really love this place. I studied ecological restoration, botany, and watershed management, but I'm a full-time artist. And like they've said, the garden has kind of helped me come out of my home. It's like my second place. I've had personal assaults on me living in this town. So as a personal, I haven't felt safe. And so being at the garden with other people of color has helped me feel a sense of belonging. I know someone brought up the diversity, equity, and inclusion position. I've actually personally looked at that job because I thought, I look for these things in my day-to-day. That's something that is very important to me. So budget-wise, I would suggest increasing the pay, because I get paid more cleaning floors than that job has posted. So I don't know who's going to apply for that job, because what it takes to deal with that, not only on an academic, but on an emotional labor, it's not enough. And so I don't know who's going to fill that job. I've been interested, but it's not, yeah. So as far as the budget for the garden, I think I mentioned it before, because of the whole sentiment on police, maybe if we could open up more positions having to do with the community ambassadors. I mean, I would hate to have to lean on them too much, because I'd also want them to have some sort of training when it comes to decolonizing and being trauma informed. So I don't know what that looks like as far as rate of pay for that position, because we need somebody at nighttime, present to look. We have a camera, but the motion sensors don't go off because we have to put it at such a distance to keep it out of arm's reach, and then we can't capture who's there. So maybe having someone patrol the area. I remember we used to have peace officers. I don't know where they are anymore. But maybe introducing a new position in that area. And then again, maybe increasing the pay for the DEI job. Thank you.
Thank you, Kate.
Hi, my name is Joanne McGarry, and I come to these meetings all the time, and this is a really important meeting, and I'm so glad that people are talking about something so important. As I've written to you in emails, I moved here 11 years ago from Santa Barbara and was assaulted at the first Oyster Fest I attended because it was a wasteland of wasted materials and wasted people. And ever since then, I've been trying to understand how Arcata can become better than it thinks it is and take seriously the really important and serious issues that are occurring in our city before we start celebrating or just going back to the traditions that we've always gone back to and partied. You know, I think it's time for this city to grow up and recognize the change that is happening in our world, both in terms of the social environment, the physical environment. You know, I'm a climate activist, so that's kind of my focus, but I've been a social justice activist as well, and we need to address this out loud on the street corners, at the ball game, seriously, at the ball game, and at other places. And we need to get a handle on this and stop the hate. We need to stop the discrimination. We need to, like I said earlier, recognize that we all belong to each other and must stand in a circle of compassion with one another. I was able to hear my friend Father Greg Boyle speak at my niece's graduation in Santa Barbara last week. And I talked to him about coming up here because he's an inspiring person doing great work down in Los Angeles at Homeboy. And hopefully I can get that to happen now that I've made direct contact with him, because we need to inspire this community to be different than it currently is behaving. So let's be serious about our community, and then we can celebrate.
There we go. Hello again. I would like to start off by saying thank you. I understand, you know, there was the discussion that was brought up about possible allocations from, feedback, sorry, from the ARPA or American Rescue Plan. I think that's a good start. And I hope, you know, that is not the end. I understand, you know, the American Rescue Plan, that's, you know, I believe almost $200 billion that was allocated through different states. And, you know, Arcata, Humboldt County was very lucky to receive quite a good chunk of that funding. And I know that it can be used for these purposes. My worry, I guess, is what happens afterwards. That funding will last quite a long time, and that's something that, you know, is definitely being considered, as I see from these discussions. But I would, you know, be, I guess, hesitant to be too optimistic about the future after that, or the future in which different change in the rescue plan makes it so that way that funding that has been provided might change. I guess what I'm trying to get to is I hope that in the future there is a way for the city to allocate funds to these nonprofits, not just Centro del Pueblo, but others in the area as well, so that there will be a long-term bill, whether it is that rainy day fund that was proposed, or whether it be something that the city consciously puts forward more funding into outside of just when it is needed. I feel like if we create a budget or create a system that is only used when the city deems an emergency, then it might create gaps. What if the city considers something an emergency and the people do not, or vice versa? What if the people consider something an emergency, but the city does not meet them at that level? Is the funding then withheld? I think these are important questions, and I can see that you all care, that you want to do something about it, and I hope in the future we can come to an agreement as our representatives and as your constituents to find a common ground when it comes to that. And I'm a little bit optimistic for that, so thank you.
Thank you. All right. No, you already, you only get to talk once. But we're going to have, after we finish the budget up, we're going to have another 3 minutes that you can have at the end of the meeting. So.
No, I just wanted to bug you one more time about the equity position, and if I can get a
For everybody having a fair
application?
chance, you get to speak once for 3 minutes
an
on each
application.
item. So
I'll have to
everybody
apply
gets a
online?
chance once. So let's check with our commenters on Zoom here.
Speaker is on. All right, Jane, we're going to go back to you first. Go ahead and unmute.
Is it working this time?
It is working.
Hey, hallelujah. Fantastic. A whole bunch of ideas. Okay. I don't know. I know we have I've seen them though. We have a volunteer policing program. And they go up into neighborhoods where somebody's going on vacation and oversee it. Maybe we could extend that program. We have a very active CERT program for emergencies. Maybe we could create a special program in addition to this concept of the ambassador program that would bring in volunteers. I don't know what we've done for Neighborhood Watch, but that's certainly another option because those can be very successful. I think it's very important going to the budget to, when we're talking about economic development and the Plaza Improvement Task Force, which I was on, to find ways to support the Ferry Festival and events like that, because they do bring money. They do bring people. That brings money to downtown businesses. We should be doing the same thing over in the Creamery District. We should be doing similar things possibly in Valley West. In order, the more special events we have, I mean, the Oyster Festival brings in enormous amounts of money. The Kinetic event does a lot for bringing people here and bringing people from out of town, a lot of interest, etc. So I think if we actually actively support some of these things, it will be good for both economic development and safety. But also, I think if you're going to have, it occurred to me, I don't know how exactly big the sanctuary garden is in terms of square feet. Maybe you could get somebody to live there and create a somebody to actually live in a small area. They're just buying modular units down at Hillfinger, I think it's called. And maybe you could put a modular unit in there. Somebody could live there. Then when the lights came on, there'd be somebody there to respond. The motion sensor lights I'm talking about. Because the point, my initial reaction was, well, just place them high enough that somebody can't get at them. Maybe you can get permission to place them on buildings across the street. from the people that own those properties. But there needs to be a way to monitor that and create a sense of safety.
All right.
And
Thank
the
you,
whole issue
Jane.
of-
That is your 3 minutes. Thank you.
Thank you. Sorry, I can't watch it.
Do you have any more comments on Zoom?
I had one, but he lowered his hand. I'll just give you a couple more seconds on Zoom to raise your hand. It did come back up. All right, Lee, go ahead.
I was just wondering, I heard that there were 2 new positions filled of the ambassador program, and I was wondering if they quit, or I'm just wondering if we need to offer benefits in a full-time position or full-time positions to people that work in that program to keep good workers doing the great work they do. And I also just want to say I empathize a lot with the people that have been speaking tonight, and I hope that we do something as a city to help out. Thank you.
Thank you. All right. Any more comments on Zoom? Okay, so we'll bring it back to us to get some consensus on this thing, on some of these things we've talked about. Kind of what I wrote down as the main things that we've discussed is looking at giving some direction to the TUT committee to work with our finance director to begin that process of evaluating what that tax measure could look like. Perhaps creating a rainy day fund. I heard the number 15,000 put out for that, and maybe 15 in that fund and 5 of that 15 now going to Centro, and having City Manager Deemer continue to work with Brenda and see what they need as actual material. And then I wrote down offsetting permitting for local events too. And so I don't know, I know Stacy, you touched a bit on maybe like thinking about creating a framework for that, and we can maybe direct our city manager to create a equitable framework for how we can provide lower rate permitting to those events. So those were the 3 things I wrote down that I heard us kind of begin to consensus and agree on.
I think we also wanted to add increasing the reserves 25% to 30%, if I remember.
And increasing reserves from 25 to 30%. Yes.
This may not be the time, so I'm happy to ask later, but if we had other budget considerations or a question with this. So I noticed on the priority goals that last time we had better lighting that had been identified in Valley West, and it's not on there now.
I think that we agreed during goal setting that we had to be like super targeted with what we were going to do this year, because I'll let Tabitha answer, but.
I can't speak to the specifics on that past goal. I don't have that information in front of me, but I will say that we, since the goal setting meeting in March, the environmental services and engineering departments took the direction for looking at additional infrastructure and beautification opportunities in Valley West. And so we did submit a Clean California grant for that. So that will address many of those concerns. I just can't speak to the something in the past that is not in the documentation I have right now. So, or if you could restate your specific question.
It was in the past priority and goals, and it didn't roll over to the to this one. So I was just wondering what happened. It had been.
Yeah, those changes, the version that you see in the budget is the version that came out of your goal-setting meeting that the council reviewed.
So somehow
I think we just kept it vague under the, umbrella of beautification and infrastructure, which does include lighting. Correct, Emily? Yes.
For parts of that we were looking at and included mention in the grant that we submitted to Caltrans at the end of May was additional solar lighting at the bus stops. So, thank you, Mayor Schaefer, for bringing up that in the goals, it was looking at those bigger picture items. And I think at the staff level, we've tried to address those in some opportunities so far.
All right, so now's the time. Anything else, anybody? We talked about those four main things. I see a lot of nodding on those four main things, so I think we have a consensus on those. Anything else, folks?
Do we need, we don't need to make
I-
a motion or anything, we're just go forth and.
Go forth and budget.
And budget.
So, yeah, just basically, I want to make sure that when it comes back to you for approval, potentially on the 21st, that I've got at least 3 of you, so we're not adding things in that you're not agreeing to. I know one of the other items we wanted to get some direction on is the project manager, assistant engineer that would potentially be funded from capital project grants. That's already been sort of outlined, and just that would be an addition to the budget, but it would be offset by revenue that would cover the cost of at least the ongoing cost of that position.
I see Netra nodding. He likes that.
Yes,
So.
he does. We did not add it initially in your budget when we were putting it together because we hadn't received confirmation on all of the grants. And in fact, it would probably be a mid-year add just to make sure that things are coming through.
So it won't be added until we actually get
until we actually can secure the funds.
And if we secure the funds, is it for like a time limited, or is it?
What he has worked on laying out with the grants ahead of us, we're working on trying to secure about 3 years within the grants.
Right, go forth and budget.
All right, folks, well, go forth and budget seems to be the moving on term. Is there anything else or final comments or questions anybody would like to add?
Well, no, I have, when we get into comments, I'm going to just bring this up, and I don't know how it'll affect things, but it could as far as staff time. I've been thinking about the Transportation Safety Committee and the Public Safety Committee. And I've been thinking about how we could merge those two. In the Transportation Safety Committee, we have 1 opening, and the Public Safety, we have 3 members only. So we could merge those together. And then eventually just, we'd have 2 extra people, and when somebody left, we would still, we'd keep it together. But I think it would reduce some staff time because we'd only have 1 staff person working that, or 1 staff person would, depending on what's going on, and maybe somebody else would come in. But I'm just thinking about how many committees. Arcata's always had a lot of committees. Takes a lot of staff time to manage all our committees. And in the past, we used to think about how we could eliminate them or combine them. So I'm thinking this might be something that we could do, and it would change around some hours as far as staff time.
I think that's a great idea. I think that's something maybe we want to add as an agenda item for later, because I think there's, talking about committees and maybe additional additions of task forces and whatnot. So maybe that can be a separate agenda item for later.
Sounds good to me. There's 3, consensus. Add that to the agenda. All right. Any other comments on budget before we move to our final oral communications period? All right, good job, everybody. That was okay.
Thank you.
I said it might still be light outside when we get out of here. All right. So then that takes us to item 12 on our agenda this evening, which is oral and written communications. This time is provided for people to address the council on items that are not on the agenda. So pursuant to the Brown Act, the council does not take action on items or that are not posted on the listed agenda, and oral and written communications. Oh, wow, I'm messing up. And the council may respond to statements. You will be limited to 3 minutes. And so if you are here in person, line on up. Or if you are on Zoom, please raise your hand. Or if you're on the phone, press *9. All right, take it away.
My name is Carl Ray, and I'm here representing myself, my ancestors, and my community. I want to uplift what folks said, and I just want to amplify that not only City Council should bear the weight of having to wipe those words, but so should Karen, David. Y'all have been sitting in those seats for a really long time, and you are, you make the big bucks. You're their boss. You should also feel what that is, because I was there the first time, and having to wipe that off that sign, it fucking hurt. And so they'll come and go, but you continue to sit there, Karen. And so I hope that you go and you feel that. You feel what it is to be in this community and to experience that targeting and then have to clean it up. And then for my second point, unrelated, but also related around community safety. Today, the city of Arcata conducted another sweep at Carlson Park. And this time there was no papers passed out to people informing them of when the police would return, just a threat that if people were still there when the police returned, that they would be arrested. No date, no time, nothing. And so I just want you to know that people are watching, people know what you all are doing. It is not okay. And Pack Out Green Team is gonna hold yet another cleanup, and they're gonna pick up abandoned encampments that were abandoned because you pushed them out with the threat of arrest, with nowhere to go. So people are watching. This doesn't get swept under the rug. You want to talk about budgets? Approve some public dumpsters? Approve some services? People are watching. People know what is happening. Environmentalists do not stand for anti-homelessness. Okay? Do your job, be a part of the community, and stop being anti-human and be anti-hate. And that includes both racism, classism, fascism.
The UN was busy today with it was the World Ocean Day. They had quite a few talks going on. I wanted to tie it to what we're doing here in the city of Arcata. Basically, I guess the closest thing was our stormwater pollution prevention plan, which I have addressed from the standpoint in the past that we didn't have a street cleaner. So for the last 5 years, not too often with the streets being cleaned. And unfortunately, all during that time, largest amount of trash, where whenever it rained, it's getting washed down the storm drains. That goes into our oceans. So I believe I might have missed the night, but maybe you did approve that street cleaner, which is good. But the other thing I wanted to bring up is that there's hundreds of, right now on the streets, hundreds of cigarette butts that are outside of businesses. A lot of them are outside bars and smoke shops. And so I'm not saying that the ambassador program should have the responsibility of cleaning it up, but it's definitely something that's being missed. And last night was supposed to be a 50% chance of rain. So if it had rained, all of those cigarette butts would have gone into the rivers and out to the ocean. So we're not really doing what we need to be doing here in the city. We have a lot of people that have backgrounds in environmental science, but it's kind of a lacking in the stormwater pollution prevention plan from my standpoint, and sort of was involved with 2 different jobs in Marin County and Sonoma, so I know a little bit about it. And so we kind of have the reputation of being an environmental friendly city, but I don't see the mechanics of getting the job done. So somebody needs to figure out, you would think that from the standpoint of at least education, those businesses, and maybe you've changed your policy about smoking in the city of Arcata, where it's okay to do it, but you would think that the businesses that have all those cigarette butts that are right in front of their businesses would like to get rid of the evidence, so that when somebody walks by, they just can't see that we have a lot of smokers that are obviously, unless you change the laws here in town, are freely smoking on the sidewalks of downtown Arcata. And I've seen them daytime, but I would imagine it happens a lot at night, and nobody seems to be doing anything about it. So that's what we could do to honor our oceans, since it is a day that you made a big deal about and the UN is working on, and doesn't seem like there's a lot of action going on there.
Hello, I have no voice, so I'll be quick. But I just want to thank the community members of all generations that came to the Ferry Festival this last weekend. We think we might have had about 6,500 or so but there was a pretty good number and it was pretty great. There were a lot of tired, tiny people afterward, but it was great. And I just want to really give a shout out to the community ambassadors who I think do a rock star job. They're pretty fantastic and are always there ahead of things and around things and trying to help get things ready for what's coming next downtown when I've seen them. Also, what else was there? I have really loved the evolution of that outdoor events grant program. And this, I know I missed the budgeting time. I was at the library tonight, but just anyways that things can look forward into the future with some of those elements is pretty cool. That is really innovative and interesting how that came together, and yay, more of that, I hope. And also, the summer reading program is starting at all the libraries, so everyone should sign up for summer reading, all ages, everybody. And yeah, I think thanks so much to the Centro del Pueblo folks that came out today too, and anyone who can go volunteer at the gardens, be a part of all the wonderful cleanups and participate in the community. All those people who came to Fairy Festival are all awesome people, and they should all go and help out at all these things because they should wear their wings and make it happen. Thank you. Thanks.
And thank you, Shoshana. It was wonderful too. It was on my birthday, and I got to finish my birthday dinner with a beautiful fire show and music on the plaza. So it was really fun.
And one of our community ambassadors is in that fire show, and they rocked it.
Hi, I just want to say I was gone for a week to where I used to live down in Santa Barbara. I'm now not driving a car for the summer. I'm going to try and get places without a car, and I'm finding the challenges already. But I walk a lot, and I walked by Sorrel Place the other day, and to follow up Greg's comment, this is what really concerns me about places like Sorrel Place and where places like that we're planning. You walk on the sidewalk there, and it is just littered with butts, cigarette butts or whatever people are smoking. It's a total mess. And if we're going to house a lot of people in high density areas, we've got to manage it a whole lot better. And this town is getting really shabby. It's getting really shabby, and in so many ways. And I love fairy festivals. I love parties, but let's do the work, and then we have a reason to celebrate. It's just really concerning me that we're just kind of letting things slide. And then we're, the unhoused issue, it's absolutely discouraging to me that our small town cannot get a handle on helping people who need help, and they're just languishing literally on the sidewalks. A lot of money is being spent, and it's really interesting that there's been money been found to extend this safe parking program, but there are people just literally lying flat on the sidewalks in downtown Arcata and probably up in Valley West too. And this has got to change really soon, really soon.
All right, do we have any comments on Zoom this evening?
First caller is Jane. Go ahead, Jane.
Hi again. I want to second the comment she made about homelessness. I think it needs to be a priority, and we need to have a policy about how to address it that will solve the problem to the extent we can. I know we've done a lot in terms of the Home Key project, but it's not enough. So we need effective solutions, and some of this extra money we have, we ought to look at how to use it in that area. I also want to comment about K Street. I didn't see anything. The Planning Commission recommended that the safety issues there be addressed by realigning it, eliminating some parking areas, and basically putting in either stop signs, or I know it was mentioned that there would be one of those lighted crosswalks. One of the commissioners said he'd practically been run over 3 times, he or his family, trying to cross the sidewalk there. So I think that's a priority. We need to get about the business of fixing K Street in the budget, and we also need to do that right away, because that's where we have a lot of, we need traffic calming there with bulb outs, whatever it takes, restriping, making it very obvious. I mean, we can try to send people on bikes over to L Street because there they can go safely. So thank you very much. Good luck with all this. We have a lot of things we need to do. And safety is a priority, and I don't think the Transportation Committee should be joined with public safety because they're totally separate issues. One involves the police department, one involves transportation. So thank you very much. Have a nice evening.
Thank you, Jane. Do we have any other comments on Zoom?
We do. Jim, go ahead.
All right, just following up with a quick comment, following up with Jade, and it would be nice to see some, I think, really low budget improvements to K Street that would lend itself to, you know, solving some safety problems there. Stop signs, sounds like they're talking about a flashing light at A Street, and elimination of at least partial or all parking on one side to allow for a full bike lane in addition to the sidewalk space. And since we're talking about budget, really kind of a non-commitment to budget, but a commitment toward the future would be deciding to designate the L Street corridor to be a linear park and to say, if you have to excuse my dog, he's pushing his dog food bowl around the background, but committing that to be a linear park and saving those open spaces. It wouldn't cost anything, but it would be a placeholder in the future. And I hope you consider that. We're up to about 750 petitioners right now, and that continues to go on. And there is a lot of support for a linear park. And I would think you'd support the second round of the transportation safety with the general plan. Once again, saying that L Street should be a linear park and you should abandon the couplet. And thank you for everything you're doing. And I appreciate all the speakers tonight as far as talking for the sanctuary garden. It's really troubling. It's amazing it's happening so close to the police department, and I hope you do get some solutions there too. Thank you.
Thank you, Jim. All right, any other Zoom comments?
No more public comment.
All right, well then that will take us to council and staff updates. Are there any staff updates this evening? We've got all of them here.
So
Yeah.
if there's any updates you want.
All right, well then we'll start, I think I started at that end last time, so we'll start at this end this time and just go down the dais. So Stacy, if you'd like to start with any updates.
Sure. I mean, we talked a lot about Oyster Fest tonight, so everyone does know about that. That was my main update. And then also I wish that Gregory was still here because I wanted to just share. I did do an update on my walk along with the ambassadors, but I'll say it again. When I did that, because I was working with them, picked up a lot of cigarette butts. That's what they do every single shift. That's part of what goes into those trash cans. So I'm not saying that there aren't still tons out there, but it's not that people are not picking them up because that is part of their job every shift.
Man, I don't really have much either. The iBlock party is happening and the planning is in full force, and myself and Vice Mayor Matthews will be emceeing it. And it will be held the Monday of Labor Day weekend like it always is. And that's something to look forward to through the summer here. Gosh, I was like writing something down. I had something I was like remembering. Oh yeah, and just one other cool thing, which maybe isn't necessarily my update, but it's a good update for everybody. Arts Arcata is this Friday, even though Main Street is rather busy with Oyster Fest. But there will be some great things going on, and I believe all of us received an invitation from the Playhouse and the folks at our space, and they will be having music there and kind of just a showcase of what they have been creating there, and also some of the trash art from the North Coast Environmental Center's projects that they've been doing. So that sounds really cool. So if you're looking for something to do on Friday night, go check out our space in the old fireworker building on 9th Street across from Campground and the Stillman building.
And I want to do a ditto on our space. Go check it out. Con la Comunidad Unidad del Norte de Arcata, we did pick up whole bucket of cigarette butts. So we are trying. We had another successful cleanup on Sunday. Wanted to mention that Arcata House Partnership could use more volunteers always for their food pantry. They do it on Fridays. Give them a call. And I had a blast at the Oyster Fest kickoff party. I loved that at Wrangletown. Wanted to mention that West Village Studios, the Home Key Project #2, they're moving folks in, and it's super exciting. I've been seeing posts on Facebook. There was a gentleman who had been waiting for surgery, and now he's getting tucked into his new place, and he can go have that surgery that he's desperately needing. As pointed out by Alex, there are several vacancies on our committees, just to let people know. The Transportation Safety Committee, the Public Safety Committee, our Park and Rec Committee, and our Energy Committee, and of course, our Planning Commission. So if you want to do some public service, do reach out to the City of Arcata, and I'm sure they'll find something that will fit for you. Anyone who wants to learn more about participatory budgeting, as you know, CUNA was the first to bring participatory budgeting to Humboldt County, and it's when you allow the residents or the community to make decisions on how public money is spent. And our city council has been very gracious in allocating $25,000 to North Arcata Valley West community. So if you would like to learn more and come observe, there will be a 6 p.m. at the Arcata Chamber of Commerce or the Visitor Center tomorrow. We'll have free food. So come in and join us and watch the process happen. And what else? Oh, there's a reminder. There will be a shuttle at the Oyster Fest. That'll be happening at the Westwood Shopping Center, Arcata High School. So you can park and not have to fight for a parking spot. And, I'm really excited. I'll be leaving Monday, coming back on Thursday to do a climate conference, but I will be back in time for that Oyster Festival on Saturday. And just a reminder that both Saturday and Wednesday are opportunities for you to stand in solidarity for Centro de Pueblo. Thank you. Correct. Oh, right, I'm leaving. You leave after, yeah. Yes, thank you. I don't know if I'm coming or going. Thank you.
Okay, well, so I'll just say this Friday, Montessori is having their mural dedication also. And on June 17th, it was brought up today at HTA, Dump the Pump. And that's Thursday, June 17th, where you'll be able to ride the bus free all day. And that's happening not only here, but it's a national event. So HTA also approved today our Arcata transit system, and HTA, they approved the starting on July 1st. So now we have made that whole thing happen. That's very exciting. And I still think, no matter what people say, I think that we can have public safety and transportation safety combined. And I know you want to we need a lot of people for volunteers in our community at this time. I also attended the Hempcrete workshop that was at the Arcata Chamber of Commerce. I went to SBDC, Small Business Development Center. They've hired Will Franklin as their new ED today, and he's also the owner of Trinity Wines. So cigarette butts, oh my gosh. There was a time there was so much going on about giving up smoking and a cancer society, and I just haven't seen that happening, especially at the county level. They used to really push that. And possibly we're gonna have to think about new development when we have that, about how to deal with smoking and where smoking would be. There's a lot of talk about we should figure out how to handle more housing for Arcata, for our homeless, and we have done a great job on doing that. And we do need citizens to think about if they are really concerned about making donations toward it. I Street was the bike lane. That was at one time, was an alternative bike lane. So you could go on I instead of K. Isn't that still true? Or did that go away?
No, it's still there, Bicycle Boulevard.
So I don't know if people actually realize that's an alternative to K Street. Maybe that we need to talk about that some more. And when we talk about, what things look like, striping is always important of how the streets are striped. And when they're striped freshly, everything looks better. So I guess that's about it for me. I do appreciate you thinking about a discretionary fund or rainy day fund or slush fund or whatever you want to call it. So, she didn't want me to use the word.
Community Support Fund, how about
Okay, that sounds good. That's probably the best name, Community Support Fund. So in the old days, they used to use those kind of terms. There are a lot of terms you can't use anymore. You can't even use webmaster. You have to call them a person in charge of the web system. So we have a lot of changes. Okay, thank you.
All right. Thank you, Alex.
I just want to remind that June is free bus rides for everyone, so get on board.
Yeah, get on board. And with that, let's all get on board and get out of here. We're adjourned. Go Crabs, go!